No animal is more iconic to the North American wilderness than the bison, and it's almost impossible to imagine the Great Plains without them. In 2016, the American bison was named the national mammal of the United States, and one could argue that this was long overdue, because for nearly 200 years they've been used in American seals, flags, and logos. They loom large in the American imagination. For thousands of years, long before humans had ever arrived, they were a fixture on the North American continent. As humans settled the Great Plains, they took advantage of the bison herds to such an extent that they depended on the bison and bison products, not just for food, but for clothing, shelter, and even tools and personal defense. In traditional plains cultures and religion, they occupy a very important place. So today, we're going to explore the ancient relationship between bison and people. Originally, I was going to include this as part of my Great Plains episode, but as you can see from the boggling length of this video, this became such a huge part of that video that I decided to spin it off into its own episode. So for anyone watching in the future, this is intended to be watched in conjunction with my video on the Great Plains. For those stuck in the present, you're going to have to wait until the next video. One more thing before we get started. I will be using the term bison to refer to these prairie tanks rather than the more common term buffalo. The reason is that the word buffalo actually refers to wild cattle in a separate taxonomic subfamily that includes animals like Cape buffalo in Africa and water buffalo in Asia. Bison are in their own separate genus, and that includes American bison, which has the adorable scientific name of bison bison, and European bison, which has the more boring scientific name of Bison bonasus. Now, I'm not trying to stand on a soapbox here. If you want to use the term buffalo, that's perfectly fine and there's nothing wrong with it, but bison is the term that I will be using. To start things off, we are going to introduce the star of today's show and discuss its biology and evolution. Modern bison trace their roots to Eurasia, where they evolved, before migrating across the Bering Land Bridge into North America around 130,000 years ago. Now, these animals migrating into the continent were not the lovable bison that we see today. These were steppe bison, which were absolutely huge, standing 2 meters tall at the shoulder with giant sweeping horns. They spread out across the continent, but their numbers were pretty limited. This is because during the Pleistocene, North America was home to several large grazing animals like horses, mammoths, and camelids, so competition for space and food was tight. During that time, those steppe bison evolved into Bison antiquus, the ancestor of all American bison, but bigger changes were afoot. At the end of the Pleistocene, the planet began to warm up, and the retreat of the glaciers produced huge environmental changes. By this time, humans had entered the continent and were spreading out rapidly across North America and hunting large game when they could. The powerful impact of these changes were that the megafauna, which had always acted as a powerful check on the bison populations, began to die off. For one reason or another, the bison endured. Some have speculated that the smaller size and faster reproduction rates were better suited to new conditions. Regardless, this was the moment of the bison, and they made the most of it by exploding across the new grasslands and becoming the dominant large grazer on the plains. The bison also had to adapt to the new climate, and to that effect, they began to get smaller and more compact. The end result is that modern bison are about 25% smaller than their Ice Age ancestors. Speaking of size and statistics, let's take a look at bison up close. Bison are big animals. Male bison, bison bulls, weigh about 900 kilograms or 2,000 pounds on average, while female bison, bison cows, clock in at about 500 kilograms or 1,100 pounds on average. Bison may look like awkward and clumsy beasts at first glance, but bison actually have a remarkable speed and agility. They can sprint for short distances at over 50 kilometers an hour, which is almost as fast as a horse, despite the fact that bison are usually much larger. They also possess incredible endurance that allow them to cover great distances and wear out pursuing predators. Bison can also be unpredictably aggressive, and a startled or trapped bison has little problem trampling or goring would-be predators. Bison rely on their keen sense of smell to detect predators and threats. Their eyesight, by contrast, is poor. For food, bison graze principally on grasses and sedges. On average, they consume about 2% of their body mass per day. Because they live in herds, they need to move regularly to find enough fresh forage for sustenance. Bison have a very fixed and predictable seasonal cycle. Spring is when new bison calves are born. This is the ideal time because it gives the calves time to grow in warm weather when the environmental threats are minimalized. Herds will aggregate into larger units as the spring wears on. The spring is important because it's peak grazing season and allows the bison to replace weight lost during the winter months. For most of the year, bulls and cows live in separate herds. The exception to this is that female herds, also called nursery herds, will also have juvenile males. This division of the sexes changes in the summer when males join the female herds for the rut, the bison mating season. During this time, males will aggressively duel for access to females, and this takes an exhausting toll on the males that are able to stay in the herd and mate. The bulls lose a lot of body weight as they patrol the herds and ward off challengers. By autumn, the bison separate again into male and female herds. These herds will disperse into smaller and smaller herds before the winter. Despite being well adapted to winter foraging, winter months are rough on bison, and poorer quality forage means that bison lose a lot of weight during the winter. In fact, in Yellowstone Park, severe winter weather is the main cause of bison death. Now, this might seem pedantic, but this is important because seasonal activity was closely considered when, where, and how Plains people hunted bison. Hunters know their prey intimately, and Plains hunters were no different. They would have learned important lessons from generations of curiosity, observation, and their own experiences of success and failure, and these would have dictated hunting practices. They would have understood that these seasonal cycles produced important changes in the physiology of the bison and in the composition of the herds. This has profound consequences when we remember that bison had a multitude of uses beyond just their meat. For example, bison hides were incredibly important in their use for shelter, clothing, and leather. If you were a plains hunter and wanted prime bison hides, you would ideally wait until the autumn when the winter coats had grown and insect damage to the hides during the summer had healed. If you wanted fat from bison, you might target bulls in the summer just before the rut because it's when bulls put on all the weight that they can to combat other males for access to females. As I mentioned earlier, the bison bulls lose a lot of body weight during the rut, and the raging hormones that make them aggressive and potent will taint the flavor of their meat. Thus, people on the plains had a well-understood seasonal round that they followed and balanced with their long and short-term needs. Some of you may be wondering about what the bison population was in ye olden times. Although estimates range wildly, it's generally agreed that prior to European contact, there were likely around 30 million bison on the plains of North America, though I've seen estimates go as high as 60 million. Those numbers are staggering, but difficult to comprehend. It's illuminating to look at accounts of early European explorers on the plains to see how they describe the multitudes of bison that they encountered. The astonishing size and number of bison herds left them in awe. To quote British fur trader and explorer Peter Fiddler in 1792,
"The buffalo are very numerous on the northeast side of the Red Deer River, and near the ground is entirely covered by them, and appears quite black. I never saw such amazing numbers together before. I am sure there were some millions in sight, as no ground could be seen for them in that complete semicircle, and extended at least 10 miles.
Another account from naturalist John J. Audubon reads,
"It is impossible to describe or even conceive the vast multitudes of these animals that exist even now and feed on these ocean-like prairies."
For those who are curious, the current bison population is 0.1% of that figure, and while that is worthy of the saddest emoji ever, that actually represents an almost miraculous recovery of what the herds were a century ago, but we'll discuss that later. However, if I can have a quick aside for a minute, I occasionally see videos or forum posts asking why bison were never domesticated, and the answers range from Native Americans didn't know how to domesticate to bison can't be domesticated, which are both clearly nonsense. Native Americans did domesticate animals, and buffalo and wild cattle got domesticated on the other side of the world, but when I was reading these accounts about the sheer abundance of bison, It dawned on me that there was probably no reason to even bother with domestication. If bison were everywhere and people knew how to hunt them, what would be the point of putting all that effort into domestication, especially when you're a nomadic and mobile people that aren't living in the same spot every year? Shower thoughts, am I right? But let's get back on track. Now that we have an appreciation for the bison as an animal, let's look at their relationship with humans. We're actually blessed with a wealth of sources that we can draw on to reconstruct this important relationship, such as native traditions, archaeology, and written accounts by early European and American explorers. As I mentioned earlier, bison and humans coexisted in North America for over 10,000 years. Since the end of the Pleistocene, however, the bison population expanded rapidly as other megafauna dwindled. This meant that people living on the plains became more and more dependent on the bison. One way that we can really see this is taking a look at how bison were utilized. I know there's that old tired cliche that people supposedly used every part of the bison, and while that's not true, it's no less impressive how many goods came from bison. This is not an exhaustive list, but should give you a good idea. First and foremost, bison were sources of meat and food. Bison meat is delicious and nutritious, and a single bison could feed many hungry mouths. As someone who has had bison meat on multiple occasions, I can attest to this. Meat could also be dried, mixed with tallow, and turned into pemmican, a calorie-rich food that was not only very portable, but could also be stored for months or even years. Bison hides were also very important resources. These thick hides provided covers for houses, lodges, and teepees, and in some cases, even boats. Hides could also be used for clothing. Overcoats, gloves, moccasins, and caps made of bison pelts were greatly valued in the cold plains winters, where the thick fur provided crucial insulation. In fact, bison have 10 times more hair per square inch than modern cattle, which means that their hides are insanely good at insulating heat. Those hides were so rugged and tough that they were also used for war shields. Rawhide could be used as rope or as cords to fasten tools to shafts. Horns could be fashioned into spoons and drinking cups. Sinew could be used for cordage and thread. Bones had a litany of uses. They could be boiled to extract grease that could be used in cooking. This might sound strange until you consider that this was a world without dairy and plant oils, so fat had to come from animals. In fact, many bison butchering sites have remains of burned bones left over from attempts to extract fat, marrow, and grease. Scapula were prized as farming hoes by agriculturalists. Other bones could be turned into tools like needles, scrapers, points, pipes, and jewelry. Even bison tails were used as fly swatters. Truly few, if any other animal has been so vital to the survival of a people. Plains people were keenly aware of this, and a quote from the famous Lakota elder John Fire Lame Deer captures this elegantly. To quote,
"The buffalo was part of us, his flesh and blood being absorbed by us until it became our own flesh and blood. Our clothing, our teepees, everything we needed for life came from the buffalo's body. It was hard to say where the animals ended and the human began."
It also shouldn't be surprising that bison also had important places in the spiritual lives of plains people. Many historical plains cultures performed regular ceremonies to ensure that the bison would prosper. Bison also featured as characters in mythologies that bestow things like corn, tobacco, and even their own flesh to the first humans of creation. Professor Neoshet Graymorning states,
The creation stories of where buffalo came from put them in a very spiritual place among many tribes. The buffalo crossed many different areas and functions, and it was utilized in many ways.
So how did people on the plains acquire everything that they needed from the bison? Since bison were very plentiful across the plains, they were continuously hunted. It's often said that plains people followed the bison across the plains, but this is nonsense. A person, to say nothing of an entire family group, cannot keep up with a bison herd. They move too far and too quickly for people to keep pace. Instead, plains hunters needed to predict where and when herds would appear and use the environment around them to their advantage. Most hunts were probably small affairs made up of a small group of hunters from a nearby camp or settlement scouring the locale for bison to kill. Bison don't tolerate humans getting too close, so early hunters had to get creative. They knew from generations of observation that many animals like pronghorn, elk, and deer could linger close to herds. Even coyotes and wolves were common sights around the herds, ever vigilant for a stray bison or calf. Plains people watching these interactions would have realized that disguising themselves as one of these animals could allow them to get nice and close to a desired bison before firing a spear or arrow into the unsuspecting prey. In better scenarios, hunters could lure or drive bison into disadvantageous terrain. In optimal conditions, it could be relatively easy to pick off a few bison from a herd or to surround an isolated bison and bring it down. Driving bison through deep winter snow or waiting at river crossings were tried and true tactics. These kinds of efforts would have yielded limited returns, but larger and more elaborate hunting methods were available that could result in dozens of killed bison, sometimes even hundreds. These are referred to as communal hunts, and they required the involvement of large numbers of people. These typically involved channeling bison herds into poor or confined terrain where they could be easily picked off or even killed in a stampede. Archaeology can detect these kill sites because they contain either a single layer of densely packed bison bones or even multiple layers of bones from reuse of the site. These will also have evidence of butchering and in some cases may even be accompanied by a campsite, which would have been a temporary processing facility. Such hunts required a very detailed knowledge of the landscape and bison behavior. Contrary to what you might think, people didn't just wait to find a herd of bison in the right place and then spring on them. They carefully orchestrated these massive operations. They would have taken lots of advanced planning and rehearsal, but the results were well worth it. A successful hunt like this could supply months' worth of food, clothing, and shelter for a community. This is really where the ingenuity of plains hunters really shines. Let's take a deep dive into these communal hunting practices. Communal hunting goes back thousands of years, and we even see communal hunting practiced by Paleo-Indians. These sites are associated with the larger bison antiquus. One common early type of communal bison hunting sites are arroyo traps, and the earliest of these date back to the Paleo-Indian period at the end of the Pleistocene. They show that people were already devising bison hunting techniques as other megafauna became scarce. Arroyos are basically steep-walled gullies formed by erosion during repeated flash floods. These arroyo traps worked by maneuvering a group of bison into the mouth of an arroyo so that they would charge in and get trapped by the steep walls. The only available exit for the bison would be the way they came in, but turning around in such a confined space with so many other bison would have been difficult and confusing. This gave hunters stationed at the top of the rim more than enough time to dispatch the bison they needed. One early kill site, the Cooper site, is worth highlighting because excavations revealed a bison skull at the site that was painted with red ochre. This is a 10,000-year-old site, and it suggests that there was already ritual activity associated with these communal hunts. Arroyos weren't the only features that were used by Paleo-Indian hunters. At the Casper site in Wyoming, hunters drove bison into the trough of a U-shaped sand dune where the bison got bogged down in the sand. Several sites are suspected of being winter hunting sites where bison were driven into large snow drifts where they would be slowed. In later times, these communal hunts got more elaborate, and we see new strategies appear in the archaeological record. Two new strategies that epitomize these were bison jumps and bison corrals. A bison jump involves driving bison over a cliff where they would tumble over and be killed by the fall. Obviously, a jump depended on local topography, being rugged and broken, and it was only suited for certain areas on the plains. Corrals, on the other hand, depended less on geography and could be used in more areas. These operated similarly to jumps, but the key difference here was that the bison were not driven over a cliff, but rather into an enclosure in which they could be penned in. These are usually referred to as bison corrals, but you may also see them called bison pounds or bison traps. The corrals were made of wood fencing and required access to wood and other building materials. They would not have been feasible in areas with limited wood supplies. Post holes from these corrals are visible in the archaeological record at such kill sites, and so we can see how large these were. For those who like statistics, let's look at the Wardell site in Wyoming to get an idea of what a bison corral looks like. At this site, dating to approximately 1,500 years ago to 1,000 years ago, the remains of a bison corral roughly 15 by 10 meters were excavated along with the remains of 150 bison. But because the entire site wasn't excavated, it's likely that the number of bison killed there over the years may have been as high as 700. The scale of these enclosures and the bison killed in them should be starting to dawn on you. We aren't talking about a few wayward bison in a corral. We are talking about huge numbers of bison penned up and slaughtered. A quote from Canadian explorer Henry Yule Hind in 1858 paints a pretty gruesome picture of the scale.
Tossed in every conceivable position lay over 200 dead buffalo, from old bulls to calves of 3 months old. Animals of every age were huddled together in all the forced attitudes of violent death. Some lay on their backs with eyes starting from their heads, tongue thrust out through clotted gore. Others were impaled on the horns of the old and strong bulls. Others again, which had been tossed, were lying with broken backs 2 and 3 deep. One little calf hung suspended on the horns of a bull, which had impaled it in the wild race round and round the pound.
Okay, if you're still with me after that grisly account, you may be asking how on earth a wood corral could contain a host of panicked bison. Wouldn't they just plow through the fence like a semi-truck going through your grandma's garden? As it turns out, indigenous people figured out a very useful trick. They realized that when bison can see through fencing, or any obstacle for that matter, they will try to break through it during a panic. However, if the barriers appear more solid and no escape is immediately visible, the bison would simply run around the enclosure until they were tired out. This is actually something that is been corroborated by modern bison ranchers. Bison pens and chutes that are solid on either side will keep the bison calm. If the bison can see through them, they are more prone to panic. Neat. But how did indigenous people do this with their corrals? They would cover the walls of the enclosure with thick brush, or in a best case scenario, bison hides. Don't get the idea that this was all foolproof. The possibility of bison destroying and breaking out of the pen was ever real, and this could lead to disaster. Despite that, corrals were an ingenious method of trapping large numbers of bison. Now, corrals weren't the only communal hunting method on the plains, and now we are going to turn our attention to the other big communal hunting strategy, bison jumps. Keep in mind that most of the strategies used to drive bison in a bison jump would have also been used at corral sites. One famous site that can be very instructive in understanding bison jumps is the fittingly named Head Smashed In site in Alberta, Canada. No, I did not make that up. That's the real name, and it's actually a UNESCO World Heritage Site, so if you're ever in the area in Alberta, check it out. The site has been extensively studied for decades, so we know this site in detail, and it has a long history. Bison jumps were done here on and off for approximately 5,000 years, with the earliest recorded jumps dating to about 3800 BCE, and the archaeology there attests to the degree of destruction. The bone beds at the bottom of the jump are 10 meters thick. Not 10 feet, 10 meters. And before you think that this is some tiny pit, the kill area spreads over 300 meters at the base of the jump. That's a lot of bison. You may be wondering how people drove these bison over cliffs, and it's actually much more involved than what you're probably imagining. These took weeks, probably months of planning. Nobody was camping next to the cliff waiting for errant bison to show up so that they could startle them over the edge. The odds of that ever working would be nil. To put this in modern, cozy terms, this isn't like pushing your unsuspecting friend into the pool for a laugh. This is the delicate art of luring your sworn enemy to the pool and getting them to jump in on their own. At Head Smashed In, the topography is perfectly suited to this. The drop is well hidden, and the path to it runs downhill, making it difficult for bison to stop. But beyond these natural features, there's an entire natural and artificial infrastructure in place. To discuss it, we need to actually move several kilometers away from the jump to the collecting area. In a given bison jump site, this would usually be an expanse of flat or rolling prairie with good grazing and access to water, a great area for the bison to congregate. One way of giving the bison an incentive to gather at the spot would be to burn the local prairie. Fire was a common sight on the plains, and it actually plays an important role in rejuvenating the environment. As it turns out, the new growth that comes out of the ground after a fire is preferred by bison and attracts them. At Head Smashed In, the collecting area is referred to as the Gathering Basin, and it's a natural depression about 40 square kilometers. Connecting the Gathering Basin to the jump itself are drive lanes, which we can actually see clearly at Head Smashed In and other similar sites, because they're marked by a series of small rock piles, sometimes called cairns. Putting drive lanes on a map shows a V-shaped path designed to funnel the bison into a tight space, not unlike what you'd see in a fishing weir. But how exactly were these rock piles along the lanes used? For years, it was believed that these were actual cairns that hunters could stand behind to keep the bison moving and panicked, but further study has shown that the rock piles were never taller than a foot or two, making them impractical to hide behind. So what were these for? Obviously, these marked the drive lanes so that when hunters returned to the site after years of absence, they had a ready-made blueprint for the drive. But these also had other important uses, and early historical accounts can cue us into their function. Based on these accounts, hunters would line the drive lanes with stakes made up of tree branches and brush. Thus, these rock piles would be used to anchor the brush and stakes to the ground. The same accounts tell us that the brush could also be anchored with mud or bison dung. This could have accomplished two important things during the drive. First, these brush piles may have been designed to resemble people, which may have exaggerated the number of people along the drive lanes helping to drive the bison. Second, these brush piles from a distance would have appeared like a natural barrier. In the same way that telephone poles or fence posts appear closer together when viewed at an angle, these brush piles would have made the boundaries of the lanes look much denser than they actually were. This makes way more sense when you consider that bison have relatively poor eyesight, and this was a brilliant way to take advantage of that. With all this in mind, let's look at the logistics of a bison jump to see how it would have worked. These would have been huge events that drew various communities together for the hunt. Those drive lanes we mentioned earlier required a lot of time and labor to construct, but even the hunt itself required a lot of people. Scholars believe that these hunts probably drew upon hundreds of people who were eager to share the great numbers of bison that would be killed. In a way, these would have been important social gatherings where distantly related families and far-off friends reunited for a hunt of epic proportions. But there was also an important spiritual aspect to this as well. Getting the playing field ready was only half the battle. Sacred forces also had to be mustered to bless and aid the efforts of everyone. Medicine men and tribal leaders would perform important ceremonies and pray for a successful hunt. Such ceremonies would have also been present on smaller scale hunts, but the magnitude of such a large communal hunt would have called for much more elaborate ceremonies and rules. These often continued during the hunt itself, even if it took days to complete. After everything was prepared and the herds arrived in the collecting area, came the daunting task of getting the bison into the drive lanes. This was very delicate work. The jump at this point was still several kilometers away, and if the herd panicked or even smelled people getting close, the bison could disperse in any number of directions. Not a good use of everyone's time. Instead, these hunters drew on an arsenal of tactics to lure or pressure the bison into the lanes. As I mentioned earlier, animal disguises were commonly employed to allow hunters to get close, but in this case, they weren't getting close to strike. They were trying to herd them. These people in the hunt are often referred to as bison runners or hazers, and they'd be staffed by the youngest and fastest people in the hunt. In many cases, a runner might don a bison hide and use bison calls to get the attention of the herd so that they'd follow. Bison, like many animals, have a natural curiosity that can be exploited. There are even some crazy accounts of bison runners dancing, running, jumping, falling, laying in wait, and repeating these motions to get the attention of the bison and lure them towards them. Another useful disguise could be a bison calf. Bison cows are always on high alert for calves in distress, and a well-experienced runner could learn to mimic the bleating of a separated calf, which would instantly get the attention of the mothers in the herd. Sometimes, disguises could be combined so that runners disguised as wolves and calves could simulate a calf in danger and draw in the bison to protect the calves. Whatever tactic was used, it was very important to be downwind of the bison. Remember what we said earlier. Bison compensate for their poor vision with a keen sense of smell. If the herd catches the odor of a person, they will immediately be alerted and could disperse. And speaking of smell, a commonly mentioned tactic in historical accounts is using fires to drive the bison in a certain direction. But researchers I read consider this an extremely risky strategy, and I imagine Smokey the Bear would probably freak out if he saw this in action. The few viewers who have actually seen a prairie fire rage know how quickly these can go out of control. Try to start a fire on a dry prairie in the summer, and a sudden change of wind could send that fire at you. If fire was used, it probably depended greatly on topography and weather conditions. It would have to be tightly controlled. Lighting small controlled fires with wet fuel could create a lot of smoke, and doing this upwind could trick the bison into thinking that a fire was approaching and prompt them to move away. These deceptions had to be done with the utmost care and could take hours, possibly even days. The animals had to be slowly and patiently moved into the lanes, and there were likely frequent moments of rest to make sure that the herd remained calm. This would have been tense and grueling, but with carefully rehearsed roles, agreeable weather, the favor of the spirits, and a little bit of luck, the bison would make their way into the drive lanes. Once the bison were into the drive lanes, they could be more easily controlled. Until now, the movements of the bison would have been slow and paced. It was important not to panic them early, but once they were in the lanes, the tempo of the drive would increase. Along the sides of the lanes would have been people clamoring, waving bison hides, and making a scene to keep the bison moving in the lanes. Some plains groups are known to have used women, children, and elderly to fulfill these roles, but this was still pretty risky. If the bison panicked and escaped the lanes, they were wont to trample anything in their path. To help with this, the bison runners kept coaxing and pressuring the herd down the lanes. In a way, these runners acted similar to rodeo clowns in modern-day rodeos by fixing the attention of the bison on them. This is where their speed was crucial, because once the bison started to gallop, these guys had to run their guts out while keeping up their ruse for as long as possible, and later historical accounts note that this job could be lethal to the runner. You think bullfighters have a dangerous job? Those guys are playing Little League compared to those bison runners. Sometimes exits or shelters were deliberately constructed along the drive lanes for the runners so that they could duck out of the way before getting caught by the herd, but this still would have been an insanely dangerous job. As the bison picked up speed and began to gallop, the herd would gather more and more inertia. The bison at the front of the herd would find it difficult to stop at the sight of danger due to the rumbling mass barreling behind them. As they turned towards the precipice, that critical mass would finally be brought to bear. All of their natural agility would have been neutralized. No matter how hard the bison at the front would have tried to stop, the mass of the bison behind them would have forced many over the edge, sending them tumbling down the cliff. If all went well, dozens of bison, perhaps even more than 100, would plummet over the edge, dying upon impact or being maimed in the fall. For any bison that miraculously survived the ordeal, hunters would be stationed at the bottom to dispatch them. Not until the advent of modern technology could such a huge number of large animals be killed in a single moment. With the remainder of the herd at the top dispersing, thanks could be given to the spirits and the leaders who organized the hunt. This would have been a thrilling moment of triumph. Those who had shown particular bravery would have been allowed to take choice cuts of the bison. Even with hundreds of people participating in the hunt, only a portion of the bison would be butchered. This had to be done in an orderly fashion so that as many useful products as possible could be harvested. The bison carcasses would quickly begin to putrefy if it was a spring or summer jump. Winter jumps and corrals would have allowed more time for this. But just like in the old Oregon Trail video game where you shoot every bison that dares cross your screen only to find out that you can carry 80 pounds back to the wagon, there would have been way too many to butcher and carry away. So people would take everything that they needed and then burn the remaining bison to combat the stench and to ward off scavengers like wolves and grizzly bears. Now, I've probably made this sound easier than it was. In reality, many bison jump attempts would have ended in failure, and that must have been absolutely agonizing at times, and there must have been a lot of trial and error in honing these elaborate communal hunts. What the rates of success actually were in such hunts is anyone's guess, but these tactics did pay off handsomely when they worked. Such techniques were the result of thousands of years of hunting experience, observation, and shared knowledge. I'm sure a few people in the audience might look at the results of a successful bison jump and offer up a critique. These methods, while impressive feats of hunting, were incredibly wasteful. only a fraction of the bison could actually be processed, and the rest would be discarded intact. This is a fair point. While it's possible that hunting parties may have tried to limit the number of bison that were killed, they never allowed survivors in the trap to get away. In the worldview of many plains people, bison had souls and many human attributes, and thus a surviving bison could alert other bison about the dangers of the jump, and, for lack of a better word, jinx future hunts. Thus, these strategies could not be divulged to the prey. In a world where hunting was the very basis of your survival, this was important. Tactics like these allowed people on the plains to hunt bison on an incredible scale and actually create a thriving enterprise around moving bison goods like meat, hides, and other products to the edges of the plains and beyond. Agricultural communities had a high demand for these products. Remember how I mentioned earlier that bison scapula were used as blades for farming hoes? Those bison scapula appear often in the archaeological remains of plains communities. Meat, fat, and hides were also well appreciated by them as well, and they were willing to trade crops and agricultural products to get these goods from hunters and traders. It's worth pointing out that this mirrors similar relationships we see in the Old World between pastoralists and agriculturalists, except in this case the plains people were not herding domesticated animals, they were hunting wild bison. We also know from historical accounts that some agriculturalists only grew crops part-time and still hunted bison at other times of the year, so don't think of these roles as strictly binary. There was a lot of overlap. As human populations grew on the edge of the plains, the demand for such bison products increased. After 2000 BCE, the archaeological record shows a shift towards massive bison kills, and this is where jumps and corrals really start taking off. Some authors have even described this intensification as an industrialization of bison hunting. Now, before you clutch your pearls and recoil in horror at the growing extent that the bison were being hunted, I want to bring everyone back to Earth for a second. We shouldn't get the idea that indigenous people on the plains were just mindless bison-killing machines. As I mentioned earlier, these people were keenly aware of their dependence on the bison, and thus would have known that when the bison flourished, they flourished as well. While it's true that bison populations were never stable and rose and fell with environmental conditions, people took conscious steps to carefully manage their landscape and to make it as hospitable as possible to the bison. In this endeavor, they had a very special friend: fire. Indigenous fire regimes could honestly be their own episode, and we could go down a huge rabbit hole, but that's going to have to wait another day
I think
because
he does have
today
an
we
episode
only
on
care
that.
about the bison. Fire is no stranger to the plains. Dry conditions in the summer combined with lightning strikes or an errant bonfire can set the plains ablaze. Bison from time immemorial would have encountered it, and recall what I said earlier, recently burned areas produce new growth and vegetation that is highly sought after by bison. They love it, and plains people, ever observant, would have noticed this. Fire could thus serve two purposes. First, it could rejuvenate areas and make them more enticing to bison. Second, fire could literally make more prairie by burning forests and parkland. Burning forests over and over again allowed the prairies to expand and thus gave the bison greater space to graze, which increased the land's carrying capacity. Over the centuries, indigenous people turned millions of acres of eastern forests into grassland, and when the grasslands expanded, so did the bison. This is why when you look at old maps that show the range of bison, they extend way beyond the plains to the east. In fact, since colonization ceased these fire regimes, eastern sections of the plains that were once tall grass prairies at contact have now been reclaimed by forests. All this allowed people on the plains to harvest more and more bison without overhunting them. Plains historian and professor Jeff Kunfer sums this up nicely with this quote:
There's no evidence that the increased harvesting of bison diminished herd sizes. Indeed, the contrary may be true.
In fact, in 1540, when Spanish conquistador Francisco Coronado became the first European to enter the Great Plains, bison and human populations were at their highest levels ever, thanks to very savvy and sophisticated environmental management. All that changed, however, with the arrival of Europeans. Initially, colonial ambitions
Gotta love
tended to
'em.
focus away from the plains, which were regarded widely as a wasteland. However, Europeans brought something to the plains that would completely change life there forever: horses. We could say much more about horses on the plains, but today we'll stick to summarizing their impact on the bison. Anytime you imagine native bison hunters, you probably imagine a scene like this, with a hunter on horseback chasing down a bison at high speed. But until very recently, this wasn't the case. Horses play a huge role in the collective American mythology of the Great Plains, and that's no surprise because the Great Plains were a great habitat for the horse. In fact, horses had existed there during the Pleistocene, but went extinct at the end of the period. So a much more accurate way to look at this was that horses were reintroduced into North America. Horse use among the Plains nations began in the south, where the first Spanish horses were captured and then spread north throughout the 17th and 18th centuries. Horses gave Plains people a speed and mobility that they had never imagined. Remember when I said earlier that ancient hunters could never follow the bison on the plains? Well, the horse changed that, and afterwards, people could hunt bison on horseback, which was faster, safer, and more efficient. A single hunter could now kill multiple bison among a stampeding herd, and coordinated hunts on horseback could bring down as many as 300 bison. In this new world, the ancient communal bison drives began to disappear. Those methods were outdated and outclassed with horses. In fact, the horse made plains life so appealing that many nations moved into the plains. Nations like the Sioux and Cheyenne moved east into the plains from Wisconsin and Minnesota to pursue the plains lifestyle full-time. Some scholars have even traced the beginning of the bison's decline to the introduction of the horse and the adoption of horseback hunting, which supposedly started to deplete the herds faster than they could reproduce. But this remains somewhat controversial among scholars, and especially controversial among their descendants. What really doomed the bison populations, though, wasn't the horse. At the end of the day, it was colonization and industrialization. American and Canadian industry also had huge demand for bison products, particularly for hides and leather, which were used in industrial machines and for clothing. The expansion of railroads and settlements also brought enormous pressure on the bison populations.
Fancy
It's worth
moving
noting that
machine.
the U.S. government specifically earmarked the extermination of the bison as a tactic to bring the Plains nations to heel. In 1872, U.S. Secretary of the Interior Columbus Delano wrote in a report,
"The rapid disappearance of game from the former hunting grounds must operate largely in favor of our efforts to confine the Indians to smaller areas and compel them to abandon their nomadic customs."
It's fitting, therefore, to look at the conquest of the plains not just as a conquest of the native people, but as a conquest of the native bison as well, since the two were so closely linked. By the late 19th century, the bison population in North America had completely collapsed from a pre-contact population of about 30 million to less than 1,000. On the brink of extinction, conservation efforts finally kicked off and started gaining support. In 1905, the American Bison Society was formed and pressured the U.S. Congress to create several bison herds, and today the bison population has staged a truly remarkable recovery to about 360,000. It's a bittersweet ending to a tragic tale where something magnificent and iconic was almost lost before people decided that these incredible animals were worth saving. Today, the bison don't roam free across the vast plains as they once did, instead being confined to national parks and ranches. But that's the price we've paid for helping them survive the catastrophe of overhunting and extermination. Actually, the word survive is a perfect note to conclude on. The American bison are survivors. They lived through the Pleistocene and emerged from a climatic transformation that ended the reign of most of the other North American megafauna. By surviving the Pleistocene and then thriving on the plains, they allowed humans to survive and thrive on the plains as well. This was not lost on indigenous plains peoples. They knew that they were intimately linked with the bison, and to this day, plains nations have a very deep cultural resonance with the bison. Even as European contact began to cast doubt on the future of the bison, bison continued to survive in American political and social consciousness. Thankfully for us today, the bison did survive westward colonial expansion due to conservation efforts. Let's hope that the future keeps looking up for these beloved animals, prairie tanks, and icons of North America. And that's going to wrap us up for today. Once again, a special thanks to my patrons for supporting my work. You guys are the best. If you would like to join the ranks of these fine individuals and support the show, you can do so on Patreon. The link will be in the description.
Alrighty, it's the end of our history video, so we're going to be moving into news. We're going to start with some Gaza and go into U.S. Domestic issues after that, various ones from just continuations on the National Guard and what Republicans and Democrats are doing, as well as Putin in Ukraine, the CDC, or
from Asia to Africa, Europe to the Americas, across the world on Monday, newspapers, websites and broadcasters united in protest. Never before, say the organisers, have so many news providers come together in this way. Many of the participating organisations are small, but several are more well known. El País newspaper from Spain, NPR, the United States National Public Radio Station. In the UK, the Independent newspaper headquartered in this building behind me. At least 260 of them in total. Al Jazeera, which has had so many of its journalists killed by Israel, is one of them. Whether displaying black banners, editorials, or pausing programming, the message we all want as many eyes as possible to see is this. At the rate journalists are being killed in Gaza by the Israeli army, there will soon be no one left to keep you informed. The action has been coordinated by Reporters Without Borders, campaign group Avaz, and the International Federation of Journalists.
More than 250 media outlets have decided to participate in this major global campaign, and I thank them for that. But I'm not saying that this will solve everything, this will solve all. But we must show the citizens of this world that without journalists in Gaza, there will soon be no more information about the war, only Israeli propaganda.
Israel's war on Gaza has been the single deadliest conflict for journalists by a huge margin. 5 journalists were killed 2 weeks ago in a double strike on Nasser Hospital. With Israel barring international media
additional
from
5
entering
the week
Gaza,
before that.
it's Palestinian media workers dying in the hundreds. And this, so the organisers of this protest, amounts to a war on journalism itself, to stop the truth getting out, so Israel can carry on doing what it's doing in the dark. Rory Challens, Al Jazeera, London.
Don't miss out. Get the full picture. Subscribe to Al Jazeera.
It's insane and very clearly them trying to make their offensive that's going on in Gaza City kind of right now, try to take all of the city, make it so report on exactly what's happening there.
Well, I'm joined now by Nadav Shoshani, spokesperson for the IDF. Thank you very much for your time this afternoon. It's the first time, in fact, we've spoken to you since that attack on the only functioning hospital left in the south of Gaza. As I was saying, it was attacked twice within the space of 10 minutes. How is the investigation into that tragic mishap, as Benjamin Netanyahu described it?
Tragic mishap.
Well, I'll start by saying the obvious for us, but I think it's important to state. The IDF does not target journalists or people working in medical teams. The IDF was operating against the Hamas target in that place, and it is truly a tragic mishap, and we will be looking into it. We are looking into it. Sadly, I do not have any additional information, and we'll be putting out the next stages of it, hopefully in the near future.
What does that mean, the near future?
Well, we're conducting this inquiry, this examination of the incidents on the field, on the ground, while our troops are also fighting Hamas terrorists, and we're doing our best to provide answers as fast as we possible can. That's what we did last week, providing answers within 24 hours, putting down a main focus.
They provided no
and
answers.
It still remains a main
just
focus.
excuses and no actual evidence.
Into it in a very deep and thorough way to learn from our mistakes, to provide transparent answers, and to make sure this never happens again, because as I said, we do not target journalists as such, and we regret the outcomes of that strike, and they were definitely not the target of our strike.
Yeah, there were 2 strikes, weren't there, within 10 minutes. If it was a double tap, as many believe, that's a war crime. Is that your understanding of what happened here?
Well, I can tell you what I understand is that we were operating against a Hamas target that was tracking the troop, and and we're looking into how the troops acted in real time, the decision making, the approval, what did they use, how many times, if many times, and what happens. And I don't want to speak before the examination is over and before I have a real clear understanding of what happened there.
Yeah, it wasn't a Hamas observation camera, though, was it? It was a news camera providing a live stream operated by a Reuters cameraman, Hossam al-Masri. You were attacking a legitimate journalist and his camera.
Again, that's not true. That according to our initial inquiry, that was held by the forces on the ground, they were targeting a Hamas target that was observing them for a few days. This is not something that happened in the heat of the moment. What is questioned is how they use the force in the decision making in real time, but not the target. The target, alongside the fact that there were journalists in different parts of the hospital, they were targeting a Hamas camera. I remind you, this is the way that Hamas is carrying out attacks against our troops in Gaza. One of their main ways is they use cameras, they track our forces, they pop out of a tunnel or a building, fire an RPG, or activate an explosive device that they have planted on the road or in the building. That's how they attack us. So this is something that has been checked, crossed with intelligence, and then executed. Now, there's questions about the execution that we're looking into, but we do not target journalists. We did not target a journalist in this case.
Except they have. They've killed more journalists than any war.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. You made an interesting point there. You talked about another camera. Is it your understanding that there was a Hamas camera on that rooftop as well as the Reuters camera? Because I think that's the first time we've heard that. Certainly the hospital director said that there was no other camera on the roof.
Well, what I'm saying is there was a Hamas camera according to our initial inquiry, and we're looking
camera
into the incident, what happened, and what were the things that led to this strike. But again, according to our initial inquiry, there was a Hamas camera. We were tracking it. We cross-referenced it with intelligence, and then we executed a strike against it.
What information justified a follow-on strike then into a location visibly filled with other journalists, legitimate journalists, and also medics?
I think that's something that will be answered in the further days and further details that we go into in this examination.
Data from Air Wars, which monitors civilian harm, indicates at least 24 separate double taps have happened in Gaza since the start of the conflict. Are investigations going into all of those?
24 accidents.
I'm not aware of that report, but I can tell you something about how we can conduct our operation. Each strike that is a planned strike that is not against a threat that is life-threatening, that has posed in the battlefield, is approved in a rigorous process. Legal officers, aerial officers, intelligence officers, and when something doesn't go right, like in the incident a week ago, we take the time, we study it, we examine it. If we need, we further it into an investigation, and we learn from it. There is a process that includes legal officers that make sure that all our strikes are according to international law, and make sure that our strikes are approved, signed with names of the people who approve it, making sure that the strikes are standing in our standards first, and also in international law. And when it doesn't, we have extreme examinations, and if needed, investigations that can even lead to criminal charges.
Okay, well, I was going to ask about that. Will IDF personnel who killed civilians and journalists be brought to account?
Well, I think that's premature. In many cases throughout the war already, we've had multiple cases where we had examinations that led into investigations. Some led to some criminal charges. So the idea, and some led also to accountability and punishment on commanders who made wrong decisions.
Let me just push back a little bit on that, because Action on Armed Violence has showed 88% of Israel's investigations into war crime allegations in Gaza over the last 2 years were either shut down or unresolved. 88%.
Well, I don't know where that stat is coming from, but I can tell you this.
Action on Armed Violence.
He frequently just like, well, I don't know.
In many cases, even more.
Why are you here speaking?
While we're still fighting, and there's a team that is separate from the chain of command, and that's their job to check. Now, some of the processes are ongoing. The stats you said that I don't know where it's coming from, but it does not sound right to me. But there's a lot of investigations that are ongoing. These are processes that some of them can take time. Hopefully, and we're doing our best to find the answers as fast as we can. Also, to be accountable, transparent, and also to learn from our mistakes in real time in the battlefield. That is something we've done throughout this war. I personally have delivered the messages of inquiries and investigations that have been complete, of people who were held accountable, who were let go from their position because of their actions. I personally delivered some of those statements, so I know this is something we're dealing with. And sometimes these things take time. but we are doing our best to check them in a very thorough way.
Understood. We'll wait patiently for that report and the evidence that comes with it. You talked about journalists, and I'd like to talk a bit more about journalists, if that's okay. Over 240 journalists killed in Gaza since October 2023, according to the UN, aside from those who died in the Nasser hospital 3 weeks ago. Pulitzer Prize-winning Al Jazeera correspondent Anas al-Sharif killed in Gaza City alongside colleagues. Can you understand how some will believe that there's a consistent pattern here of journalist deaths at hospitals, inside media tents, in clearly marked press sites, on the top of that hospital, which journalists have been using for many weeks? How can it be explained away other than to say it is systematic targeting?
Well, I think there's two very different cases. There is a tragic incident from last week that we are looking into, examining, that we have expressed deep regret about it. And then there's other cases. Anas al-Sharif was a terrorist, an active terrorist in the military wing of Hamas, receiving a salary from Hamas. So I think the picture is way more complex than that. I understand why people might look into incidents, but the picture is very complex, and it needs to be explained. Gaza is the place where Hamas controls everything. Hamas control everything. There are so many cases. We've seen it on October 7th. Part of one of the largest terror attacks, massacres in humanity. Journalists were part of the forces going in, so-called journalists. So I think
Oh
there's a
my
serious
God.
problem here.
It's very hard to trust the journalists who are in Gaza because you simply don't know whether they're associated with Hamas.
But they won't allow any other journalists in.
Right, but I know I can
Well,
speak
there's
on
a
our
simple
behalf.
solution then, isn't there? Send in
I can
independent
speak on our behalf.
international
I can speak on our
journalists.
behalf and say that every strike that we conduct is checked. If there's not valid, concrete intelligence, I've seen with my own eyes the intelligence of Anas al-Sharif. Some we were able to declassify, some not. Active terrorists in a military wing of Hamas. And I think in that discussion needs to be also asked. The world needs to ask. Are we also holding Hamas
Except they haven't
accountable
provided proof
for
of
abusing
them being part of the organization
the
of Hamas?
dignity of the press vest? Because I think wearing a press vest is very important. I take reporters with me into Gaza, and I know and I hope that their vest is respected, and we do everything.
All right. So yeah, we take your point. We're short of time, and I just want to play you a clip from Benjamin Netanyahu from about three weeks ago. Have a listen to this.
We have decided, and I've ordered, directed the military to bring in foreign journalists, more foreign journalists, a lot. There's a problem of assuring security, but I think it can be done in a way that is responsible and careful to preserve your own safety. So the directive has been since, when is it? 2 days ago. From what you're telling me, it hasn't yet been implemented, but it should be, because I think you should see it.
So a direct order then from the Prime Minister for the IDF to take international journalists into Gaza. That was 3 weeks ago. How many have you taken in?
Well, I've taken into Gaza personally. Me and my team have taken dozens of reporters in around maybe 8 to 10 occasions in the last
independent international. Okay, independent international journalists. What organizations?
So my job as IDF spokesperson is to take people on embeds with IDF troops. That's what I can speak about.
Which organizations were they from then?
In recent weeks,
taken them in?
At least once a week, and many of the weeks twice a week. Dozens of different.
Which organizations are they from? Which media organizations?
Wide organizations, and we're also participating with Foreign Press Associates in Israel, giving them an option.
Which organizations have you taken journalists in from?
I was saying, you cut me off in the middle of the sentence. We have various news outlets from all across the world that we work with, and we also give place to the FPA, the Foreign Press Association, to put forward the names of the people they want to choose. So there's someone who's external who can choose the reporters going in. And we do our best to provide an opportunity to anyone who wants to come in. Any reporter can join us. If you want to recommend a friend, we will
Sky News would
facilitate
love
his
to come
entry
in.
even next week. And you're invited. If you come to Israel, I'll take you in personally with me.
Right. So which organizations in the last 3 weeks have you taken in? Which media organizations, specifically, name names, have you taken in?
I think I tend to keep my professional relationships with the outlets. I work with them. I can provide.
They're journalists. They provide news to the public.
There's no secrecy. There's respect when you are a spokesperson working with journalists, and you work with them and you communicate with them. I don't need to name the names. There's been dozens of
absolute bullshit
reporters coming in with us to Gaza in recent weeks.
And we can come in with you
anyone
next
who
week.
wants to come can come with us into Gaza.
Sky News can come into Gaza. And you're saying that Sky News can come into Gaza with you next week?
Sure, you're invited.
Okay, we will be there. Just name the time and the place. I want to talk about something. Well, actually,
I'll see you if that happens.
And that will be on an embed. We won't be given unfettered access, obviously. That'll be
Probably not.
with IDF troops.
I am in charge on embeds. I have brought in dozens of reporters in recent weeks, and we'll continue doing that at least once a week, maybe twice a week. You're invited, and that's my part. I'm in charge of having reporters join IDF troops, and I coordinate that, and we've done that a lot in recent weeks.
Okay, we'll hold that to you. I want to talk about Greta Thunberg just before we let you go. She and others have been attempting once again to bring aid into Gaza by sea. It's been reported by the newspaper Israel Hayom that she'll be detained in terrorist-level conditions in a detention centre. Is that right?
Well, I don't know about that. That's more for the different authorities in Israel.
Yeah, anything negative that the IDF or Israel is doing, he knows nothing about. I can't speak on it. But otherwise, he'll give vague, like, oh yeah, sure, we let some journalists in,
Well,
but I won't tell about them either.
I can tell you this. We've already dealt with these types of cruises to Israel. They bring very little aid, not even close to the amount that's going in daily to Gaza. Hundreds of trucks have been going into Gaza daily, and Israel said we're happy to facilitate any aid from anywhere going into Gaza, airdrops on the ground, and so on. And I think that's what's important in this discussion, and not to make it a cynical discussion.
Okay. And finally, the ongoing operation in Gaza City. For those who are simply too ill or too weak to move, can you guarantee their safety?
Well, you know, we've shown throughout this war with Hamas that began on October 7th and has continued ever since that we are doing everything we can to keep civilians out of harm's way, to give notice. The IDF is the army in recent history that has given up the element of surprise the most times in this type of war. And we plan on doing that moving forward. Moving forward on our operations on Gaza City, we have planned a humanitarian plan. Where should people go? How should they go? When they arrive to that said area,
what if they can't go? What if they're too ill, too sick, or too hungry to move?
So there's a lot of efforts going on, including with the international community, to make sure that we are doing everything we can. Again, this is a difficult war. We know, as we've seen in the past in northern Gaza, that Hamas will try and prevent people from leaving areas so they can use them as human shields. We've seen this in the past. We are committed to doing everything we can.
I don't think they provided any proof.
To work with the international community on solutions.
Sure, they've seen it.
And that's what's going to happen in Gaza City as well. And as we were speaking, there's works being done to repair water lines in southern Gaza, to make sure tents are coming into Gaza, southern Gaza, food, field hospitals, etc. Because this is important for us, and this goes in the same line with our operational plans to make sure that there's a humanitarian plan supporting our operational plans.
We've kept you far too long. Lieutenant Colonel Nadav Shoshani, IDF spokesman, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Let's bring in our Middle East correspondent, Adam Parsons. He was listening to that in Jerusalem. Adam, I don't know what your plans are next week, but you're invited to go into Gaza with the IDF.
Yeah, I mean, that's an invitation that I'm sure Sky News will accept. Let's wait and see what strings may be connected to that and what may be their interpretation of that, but that seems pretty clear. They have conducted embed entries into Gaza before. They did one a week ago or so for Israeli journalists who saw scenes of absolute devastation. But yes, we will follow up on that, and it was something that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu had said, is that he thought the international press should get in. Now, I think for those who are not familiar with this terminology, when we talk about an embed, what we mean is you are embedded with the military. In other words, you go in with them inside one of their vehicles. You don't have free movement of where to go. You will talk to them and get taken out with them. You will get images of Gaza, but obviously you will go to the places that they take you. That is as good as it gets in Gaza at the moment. It's as good as it has been throughout this war, because the Israeli government, the Israeli military, will not allow unfettered access to journalists to see for themselves what's going on. Their argument publicly certainly is that it's simply too dangerous to allow that to happen. Of course, there are plenty who think that what is happening is that international independent media are not being allowed to see what is happening in Gaza, and thus, as you said, Jonathan, reliant on the journalists who are already in Gaza, way over 200 of whom have been killed during this war.
OK, Adam in Jerusalem, thank you for now.
Israel has pushed tanks further in.
The BBC speaking more on the actual offensive into Gaza City that the IDF is doing.
To Gaza City and detonated vehicles carrying explosives in one suburb. That's according to witnesses there. At least 98 people have been killed in Israel's continued bombardment of Gaza in the past 24 hours, according to health officials in the territory. Israel says the spokesperson for Hamas's armed wing, Abu Ubaidah, has been killed in an airstrike in a block of flats in Gaza City. He was among one of the few remaining senior members of Hamas's military wing from before its deadly 7th of October attack in 2023 on southern Israel. Hamas has not confirmed his death. Our Middle East correspondent Yolande Nell is following developments from Jerusalem and explained what the reported death of this senior military figure means for Hamas.
This will be another significant blow to the organisation. Abu Ubaidah, his nom de guerre, was a long-time target of the Israeli militaries and the long-time spokesman of the Al-Qassam brigades. He had appeared often with his face wrapped by a red checkered scarf in broadcasts that were carried widely around this region in previous wars and during this war as well. Israel says that he was the one responsible for putting out those propaganda videos showing the Hamas-led 7th of October attacks on Israel and the very disturbing videos of hostages that have been put out since. Now, there was this strike in the Ramal neighborhood of western Gaza City on Saturday. It was a very dramatic attack and immediately clear that this was a highly desired target that the Israelis were going after. Local journalists say that at least 7 people were killed and 20 injured, with children among the casualties. And there have been some strong comments from the Israeli military who say that they will continue to pursue other Hamas leaders, including those abroad. Now, it's been really a deadly few days with
including those abroad means those seeking refuge in other countries. So that means Israel is going to probably continue bombing other countries like Lebanon or Iraq, Iran.
Hamas-run health ministry saying yesterday that in the previous 24 hours, at least 88 people were killed. We've had reports that as many as 90 people were killed through the day yesterday, about a third of those aid seekers in Gaza. And since the morning, there have been more Israeli strikes, particularly centered on Gaza City, with the Shifa hospital there saying that at least 11 people have been killed.
Well, thanks to Yolande for that update.
Israel is committing genocide in Gaza, according to the world's leading genocide scholars association. It passed a resolution saying the legal criteria defining genocide have been met, as set out in the UN Genocide Convention of 1948. It was backed by 86% of the International Association of Genocide Scholars' 500 members. There was no immediate response from the Israeli Foreign Ministry. Israel has in the past strongly denied that its actions in Gaza amount to genocide and says they are justified as self-defense. This was the association's president, Melanie O'Brien.
We still have to apply aspects of international law. There isn't just a blanket right to self-defense. So that self-defense has to be carried out in a proportion.
There is an international law that allows for a spontaneous militia when your land is being occupied or you're being invaded, like Gaza is.
Manner, and it also has to be shown to be something carried out from military necessity, neither of which are demonstrated anymore by Israel's actions on the ground in Gaza.
Israel is fighting a case at the International Court of Justice in The Hague that accuses it of genocide, defined in the 1948 Convention, which was adopted in the wake of the Holocaust, as crimes committed, quote, with intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnical, racial or religious group as such. The Convention requires all countries to act to prevent and stop genocide. Several international and Israeli rights groups have made the same accusation. Israel launched its assault on the Gaza Strip after October 7th, 2023, when Hamas fighters attacked Israeli communities, killing 1,200 people and capturing more than 250 hostages, according to Israeli tallies. Since then, its military action has killed 63,000 Palestinians, damaged or destroyed most buildings in the enclave, and forced nearly all its residents to flee their homes.
Spain.
Israel has severely restricted aid, and famine has been declared in parts of Gaza by a global hunger monitor, a charge Israel also denies.
As an expert in international law, I can definitively say that there is no justification for the commission of war crimes, crimes against humanity, or genocide, not even self-defense. And I think in this situation, if we were talking on the 8th of October, you could certainly talk about the concept of self-defense being valid. But now that we are almost 2 years beyond that, that justification has really gone out the window.
Genocidal acts by Israel listed in the resolution include deliberate attacks against and killing of civilians, including children, starvation, deprivation of humanitarian aid, water, fuel, and other essentials for survival, sexual and reproductive violence, and forced displacement of the population. The resolution also states that the 2023 Hamas attack on Israel constituted international crimes. Since its founding in 1994, the Genocide Scholars Association has passed 9 resolutions, recognizing historic or ongoing episodes as genocides.
New this morning, President Trump's...
It's just incredibly sad and frustrating that nothing seems to be stopping Israel's genocide, despite the fact that most Americans to stop it. Most people around the world want it to be stopped. Go to the U.S. Updates on Trump tariffs.
Efforts to reshape the nation's trade policy have taken a hit after a federal appeals court ruled that most of his sweeping global tariffs are unlawful. However, the ruling will not take effect until at least October 14th. Now, that gives the Trump administration time to file an appeal with the Supreme Court. CNN's chief data analyst, Harry Inton, joins me now on how Americans are feeling about tariffs. And it's interesting, you and I were talking about this. I never viewed tariffs as popular with Americans, but at least for Trump's base and supporters, at one point, they were really giving him the benefit of the doubt here.
What's changed? They really were, Bianna. And I will note, it was not just the base. It was the overall American public. And they have turned against tariffs the same way college football pundits have turned against Arch Manning after his performance in Columbus on Saturday. Look at this. New tariffs on imported goods. You go back to November of 2024. Look, the popular position was favor. They favored new tariffs on imported goods, 52%, 48% opposed. You go to this side of the ledger, look at that, the opposition up like a rocket. We're talking about 60% opposing new tariffs compared to just 40% in favor. So it was majority favor back when Trump was reelected in November of 2024. Now it's a clear 3 in 5 Americans oppose it. The Americans have gotten a taste of the tariffs and they spit it right out.
So is the taste paying more? I mean, because that's how economists have always described this, as actually a tax on consumers.
Yes, it's exactly right. Why is the opposition up like a rocket? Well, it all comes down to money out of the pocketbook, right? Impact of tariffs on prices. Look at this in the short term. 77% of Americans now agree they increase, they raise prices in the short term. Look at this itty bitty number at the bottom. That's 1, 2, 3, 4. When you in fact can count it on your own hand, you know it's a small percentage. Just 4% of Americans believe that in the short term, tariffs decrease prices. Long term, look, this has long been the Donald Trump argument, right? That even if they're short-term pain, in the long term will pay off. Not according to Americans. Impact of tariffs on prices, even over the long term, look at that. 50% say increase, just 25%, just half the level, say decrease. And while 25% in this particular case is better than 4%, 25% is way less than 50% of Americans who say that, in fact, prices will increase over the long term because of tariffs.
Can you do me a favor and go find who the 4% are?
I will go ahead. I will do some on-the-street reporting. I'm sure I can go out to Times Square and see what I can find out there.
Okay, but in all seriousness, from the tariff policy to the trade policy, how is it impacting Trump's overall approval.
Right, okay. If this was happening in a bubble, right, and it was, okay, I don't like tariffs, but it isn't impacting my overall view of Trump, I think Trump would be like, forget about it, doesn't matter. But this is why the political implications are so important, because Fox News literally asked, what's the top reason that Trump's doing a bad job? What ranks as number one? The economy and tariffs ranks as number one. The number one reason why those who disapprove of Trump think he's doing a bad job, it comes right back to tariffs. The bottom line is this: when prices go up, presidential approval ratings go down, and that's exactly what we are seeing in the polling
Perhaps this was the deflection that Ron Brownstein was talking about in a segment in the last hour about the increase in these ICE raids, because they're deflecting from something the president is not happy about. That's
often something that Donald Trump will do, is if he sees something he doesn't like, he's going to go in the other direction and try and bring the American mindset with him.
All right, Harrington, good to
Always just trying to distract from one of his other
With us
fuck-ups.
now is Congressman Lloyd Doggett, a Democrat from Texas. Congressman, I got to ask you, you're in Austin, I think, this morning. I don't know if you heard Harry Enton just there take this unprovoked swipe at quarterback Arch Manning. I just want to give you a chance to respond to that this morning, since you had to listen to it.
Well, absolutely. I was appalled. I'm very much Longhorn and hook 'em horns. We're going to have a better week ahead. It was a tough game, well played by Ohio State, and I think Texas will get better and better and come back, and it will be a good season for us. And important issue of the day, John.
After what Harry said, I had to give you equal time. I think there are rules for me to do that there. Listen, Congressman, you also heard Harry there talking about tariffs and the slipping popularity of the tariffs and concerns about the economy. What are you hearing from your constituents around Austin?
Well, those that remember, President Trump told us in January that he was going to bring prices drastically down. And whether it's a cup of coffee or a new car or any number of things in between at the grocery store, prices keep going up as a direct result of President Trump imposing a new tax by himself called a tariff. And we are now paying significantly more than we were at the beginning of the year in Trump tariff taxes. I think as manufacturers or as importers deplete their inventory, we will have more and more of an impact. Don't know the impact on the holidays, but the prices will be higher everywhere. John, I see all of this just like the other issues you've been discussing this morning and reporting on, whether it's the invasion of American cities with the military, the tariff tax, the decision by the president to repeal or terminate funding that a Republican Congress had approved. All of these things are just part of a pattern of President Trump wanting unrestrained one-man rule, which we call tyranny or dictatorship. And that's the path that we're on.
This man is a Texas rep, specifically a Democratic one. Very few.
And the Republican Congress is sitting there idly, willing to approve anything that he does, or at least to be quiet about it if they're unwilling to give it a direct approval.
You just brought up rescissions, repealing funding that Congress has approved. There are some members of your party who think this is grounds to shut down the government by the end of the month. Where do you stand on that?
Well, it's a very tough decision. I think if the government shut down, it will clearly be the result of the Trump administration. I voted previously against a continuing resolution. We face the question of whether we are in what is the least worst alternative. Are we in a worse situation if Trump is there with no government funding approved, or in trying to reach some kind of agreement where we know we are dealing with a totally untrustworthy individual in the form of Trump? The fact that a Republican Congress approves money for international peacekeeping, for democracy promotion, for economic development, so that we don't let the Chinese rule the underdeveloped world. All of these are things that Trump just said, I'll terminate it, and you can't do anything about it. We could do something about it this week or next, but Republicans are unlikely to let us even have a debate or vote on this, because they are so intent, so fearful, I guess, really, of Trump imposing a mean tweet against one of them, that they won't take action if it differs from Trump in the slightest. The only exception has been the Jeffrey Epstein sex tapes, and we'll see whether Republicans are willing to get to the bottom of that or not.
discharge fishing could ripen. You could have a vote on that soon this month. It does sound like you have some concerns, as do many Democrats, that actually shutting down the government might give the president even more power to take unilateral action. But I do want to ask you about another subject quickly, because I know it's something you care deeply about. Obviously, the floods in Texas, which killed so many people, including children. You are still asking questions of the federal government, and you seem to be having a hard time getting answers. What are you asking? What are they telling you?
Well, John, that's so true. I was there for the prayer service for one of these little second graders to lose 27 people, from mostly little girls, from one camp, and 116 in all, is something that is so painful. I was asking before this tragedy happened for the NOAA and the National Weather Service to tell us about the impact of Trump's slash and burn, Elon Musk coming in, eliminating people no matter how good they were, not with a matter of efficiency, but wanting to build up a federal body count. I've simply been asking since this tragedy, this catastrophe,
Take a chainsaw to the federal government.
Data on what actually happened that night. We know that critical positions were not filled that night. Some question as to whether camps and people in the area, other than one person in Kerr County who apparently was asleep, got the notice in the middle of the night to rescue and prevent this from ever happening. The National Weather Service for 2 months, though its director told me it would be easy to produce the call logs, the chat logs, the radar logs, so we can find out what actually happened that night. They've stonewalled me and they failed to produce it. I think there were mistakes, errors, gross negligence at the local level, a failure by the state of Texas, but we need to understand what went wrong at the federal level in order to prevent this from happening again. And of course, this unresponsiveness, this is characteristic of this administration that doesn't believe in transparency, because when you have one man authoritarian rule, you don't have to have any accountability with a Republican Congress that is so compliant.
Congressman Lloyd Doggett from Texas, we do appreciate your time today.
Republican Congress that's whipped, spineless.
Headed back to Washington, I know, this week.
A judge blocking the deportations of Guatemalan migrant children while the kids were already on a plane. The order says the U.S. cannot remove them from the country without a deportation order. A Justice Department lawyer confirming the children would be taken off the plane and returned to government custody. DHS is expected to launch an immigration enforcement operation in Chicago later this week. Yesterday on CBS's Face the Nation, Secretary Kristi Noem said expanding this move to other cities is not off the table. She said, quote, we do intend to add more resources to those operations. All right, starting here this hour, Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker spoke with our Ed O'Keefe on Face the Nation, calling President Trump's deployment to cities a, quote, invasion with U.S. troops. He also claims the president is looking to do more than just crack down on crime in Chicago.
Well, they should understand that he has other aims other than fighting crime. The other aims are that he'd like to stop the elections in 2026, or frankly, take control of those elections. He'll just claim that there's some problem with an election, and then he's got troops on the ground that can take control, if in fact he's allowed to do this.
For more on this, let's bring in Jeanette Hoffman and Haima Moore. Jeanette is a Republican strategist and president of Marathon Public Affairs. Haima is a former director of the Office of the DNC Chair and now a principal with Cornerstone Public Affairs. Thanks to both of you. And we will get to those comments from the governor of Illinois, but I want to start with this story about a judge blocking the deportation of more than 70 unaccompanied children from Guatemala. Jeanette, let's start with you first. Do you think this really may have the Trump administration sort of rethinking their approach to deportations, especially when it comes to minors?
Well, listen, there are a lot of concerns about due process in the immigration process, but I don't think this case particularly was one of them, specifically because they were reuniting these children with their relatives in Guatemala, and DHS was working with the Guatemalan government. This is, they had worked towards this effort here, and at least one of the children's, one relative had to request that one of these minor children be returned to Guatemala. So they were not actually being deported. They're being
Okay, but what about all the
reunited
other
with their
kids? Did
relative.
every kid actually have someone requesting them to come back? Jesus.
So yes, I understand there are due process concerns with some of the immigration actions here by the administration, but I actually don't think this case was one of them. And I think it was a pretty outrageous action for the court, for the judge to basically, take these kids off the plane and stop the process here.
Jaime, I want to bring you in on this. Is your take that this was a reunification process, or was this about deportations? And what does this legal bloc really say about due process moving forward?
Hi, Cheryl. Good to see you, and happy Labor Day. Thanks for having me. Look, I think this says a couple of things. I think what we've seen over the past 7.5 months is the Trump administration try to stretch executive power as much as possible, and they've done this through the courts. We've known President Trump to be very litigious, and so I think this process it works in his benefit politically, and he is quite frankly wanting to go through this legal process. One, two, what it really shows is we don't think that the Trump administration, Secretary Noem, President Trump, have a real plan and vision to really carry out sort of this border security and this immigration process. And so while we're seeing a lot of fumbles throughout this process because there's no real plan. And so we do know that it's largely about deportations, it's largely about pleasing the base, it's largely about keeping a campaign promise to get as many people out of the country as possible. But there's not a lot of forethought and vision and process to this.
So I want to pivot to crime now. Jeanette, we heard from Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker just before we brought you both in, saying sending military troops to Chicago would be, quote, an invasion by the Trump administration. He's also, as you know, accusing President Trump of wanting to subvert the upcoming midterm election. So what's your reaction to that?
Well, first, there's a lot of rhetoric here that, subverting the midterm elections, there's no proof of that. What President Trump is telling
Fuck this bitch. Jesus Christ. He is actively trying to reduce the amount of people who can vote, sending military to occupy cities.
Governor Pritzker to do is get Chicago under control. There were 53 people shot just this Labor Day weekend, 250 homicides in Chicago. Chicago has a real crime problem. President Trump is saying, get it under control or we will, like we did in D.C. In D.C., the mayor of D.C. has said what the Trump administration is doing has really helped. Carjackings were decreased by 85%. The results are there. The people of Chicago deserve to feel safe, whether they're in the south side of Chicago or any other area. Kids deserve to feel safe walking to school. So listen, I know there's a lot of rhetoric coming from Governor Pritzker. I know he may be considering running for president in 2028, and that's why he feels the need to say some of these outrageous things. But the bottom line, this is about protecting the people of Chicago, and that's what President Trump intends to do.
Jaime, what do you think this is about? Is this about crime or is this about something else?
Look, I think, and I've heard from a lot of Democrats, I've been in 3 states over the last 2 weeks, and a lot of Democrats and a lot of independents and even Republicans are really proud of the leadership that Governor Pritzker is showing right now. What I've seen and what I know is over the last 2 terms, Governor Pritzker has put more state police in Illinois, in Chicago than any governor before. And so I think he understands and he's taken this crime issue very seriously. And crime has been a problem across the country, not just in blue cities and red cities as well, for a long time. And so I think if President Trump and his administration really thought about wanting to help the crime problem, they wouldn't have zeroed out the police budget in this last bill. They would put more money in. They would put cops. They put money in cops and community policing. They would put more money into local funding to help solving these problems around mental health, around drug use. And so I think the rhetoric is really on the Republican side. If the Republicans and Donald Trump and the House of Representatives and the Senate really cared about helping these cities deter crime, they would put a lot more investment in things that are going to deter crime, not just send the National Guard in at this moment for political ploy.
So when it comes to how this plan is already sort of playing out in other cities, we heard this weekend from Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem. Yesterday, she talked about ICE operations in Los Angeles on CBS's Face the Nation. Listen to part of that conversation.
I won't speak to the specifics of the operations that are planned in other cities, but I do know that LA wouldn't be standing today if President Trump hadn't taken action. Then that city would have burned down if left to the devices of the mayor and the governor of that state. And so the citizens who live there, the small business owners in downtown LA, they're thankful that President Trump came in with federal law enforcement officers and helped support keeping those streets open, keep their homes and businesses from burning down, and made sure the law and order was restored.
Jeanette, let's bring you in to talk about, okay, I see Jaime is up. So Jaime, let's go to you first.
It's also important to note that CBS is one of the news stations that has given in to Trump's demands and in the lawsuit and paid him out, and now they have like a minder from the government to make sure that they're putting out the right propaganda.
Is this an accurate read of the Trump administration's deployment to Los Angeles?
I don't think so, but here's the reality. Any mayor, any governor, Republican or Democrat, will welcome the support of the federal government when there's vision and there's thought behind it. I think when you talk about LA, both on the immigration front and the wildfires, which they like to conflate a lot, the new mayor of LA, Karen Bass, has done a great job in rallying her troops and pulling the city back together, along with the support of Governor Newsom. And so I don't think that the secretary is actually right about this. What we want to hear, what Democrats, Republicans, Independents want to hear, is a plan. If you're going to go into these cities and go after people and do mass deportation, what is the plan? Who are you deporting? Why are you deporting them? And what's due process?
And Jeanette, let's bring you in to round out this discussion. Do you think what's happening in Los Angeles right now is a successful representation of the Trump administration's vision?
Well, I think Karen Bass, the mayor of LA, should be grateful
I don't know why, but her face screams she would do Munchausen by proxy.
for the administration's support. You saw the riots against the ICE agents in LA. There was nothing that the mayor wanted to do. She didn't bring in local police. So the National Guard was deployed by the president. Now, he was able to do that because he said, he was protecting federal assets. Whether or not he is able to deploy U.S. National Guard troops to other cities using that same maneuver, time will tell that, because he might have to invoke the Insurrection Act, which would be a much bigger decision on the president's part. But, I think that Mayor Bass, Gavin Newsom, who is looking to clearly score some political points, should welcome the cooperation of federal agents, not only with these riots that were out of control, but with the California wildfires when they do need assistance from the federal government. I think every mayor who's dealing with violent crime in their cities should want the support of President Trump. 80%.
Yeah, but he's not going to do it with all the red states that are actually have cities with the highest violent crime rates in America.
Of Americans, 80% feel that violent crime is out of control in our cities.
Okay, also, 80% of Americans are delusional morons who got brainwashed by Fox News.
Something that an overwhelming majority of American people support.
Okay, a very fascinating conversation. We'll have to leave it there for today. Jeanette Hoffman and Jaime Moore,
Was
thanks
it
to both of you
fascinating?
for your time and your
Just
perspective.
this stupid bitch saying
Mike
dumb
Johnson
shit.
is concerned about his House majority. Now he's being deployed to sell the crime narrative and the crackdown on cities, which there was a Quinnipiac poll yesterday showing something like 56% of Americans already disapprove of Trump's actions in D.C. And deploying the National Guard for this purpose. If he tries with Chicago, these numbers are going to keep getting worse because it's ridiculous. And everyone sees it. And despite what Trump may think, people don't like authoritarianism in America. And I still have faith that despite them rigging the rules in this way, that Democrats and independent voters still have like a cultural understanding that we are not about kings and authoritarians and maybe fascists, but we don't like that kind of action if it comes home to America. So those numbers, I think, will still keep getting worse for him. But Mike Johnson has to try to change that. Here he is on Fox News this morning, and they played a clip of Gavin Newsom pointing out that what'd you say? It's in here. Yeah, pointing out that crime is higher in Louisiana than in California, and which is Mike Johnson's home state, and he has to deflect a bit.
But he name-dropped you personally yesterday, essentially trying to say that crime is worse in Louisiana than it is in California. Take a listen.
It is.
Thoughts?
If he is to invest in crime suppression, I hope the President of the United States would look at the facts. Just consider Speaker Johnson's state and district. Just look at the murder rate. That's near.
Okay, and then here's an example of Fox News being insanely stupid. They're saying Newsom murder rate is 4 times in LA than in California. What? LA is in California, first of all. I don't think Newsom said this either, which is what they're trying to say that he said. And obviously they won't actually show any numbers because they can't prove it.
Californians in Louisiana.
have at it.
Again, Gavin Newsom will do anything for attention. He can name drop me all he wants. He needs to go and govern his state and not be engaging in all of this. Look, we have crime in
Can you
cities
pause it?
across
He needs to go govern it. He's he's not governing his state by pointing out he's doing a better job than your state. Give me a
Engaging
break.
in all of this criticism of me that is
Yes.
on the same lines as I'm extending on him.
I mean, that critique would have been more valid when the dude was podcasting with Charlie Kirk, but that's when Mike Johnson likes that.
Right.
Yeah, like
also the idea that like a name drop. Gavin Newsom has so much more public recognition than Mike. Most people don't know who
Yes.
Mike
Chasing.
Johnson is.
Mike Johnson.
His Pee Wee Herman makeup.
Yeah, go back to worrying about your son's porn intake and maybe like figure out the fact that you don't have a bank account or something like that. I mean, this guy's almost like incognito man by design.
The hell?
He's the most invisible servant of God that we have in Congress, and
Clout chasing.
yeah, like to his credit, he was able to. Chuck Schumer was rolled by him in like the big beautiful bill thing, where he thought that the margins would be so slim in the House that they would be infighting, but Mike Johnson kept basically the whole caucus together
In a way that the Democrats couldn't.
So I'm not trying to say he's ineffective in that way, but as like a speaker on behalf of the Republican Party, I mean, everyone's already falling asleep, but keep going.
But also they're more authoritarian party.
Yeah.
We want to keep with that clip, or we want to
Well, he basically just deflects.
Continues into this next clip.
And so then he had to go on CNN. He was on Good Morning America this morning. They're panicked. He was on Fox News, now
They're
making
doing
the
the press
rounds. And
circuit.
CNN is a little bit more diligent here in pressing him on this point.
Sometimes local governance does not do the job, and the oversight in D.C. is long overdue.
I was going to ask when you might be calling for the National Guard in Shreveport, which is, you have part of your district is Shreveport. The FBI statistics, actually, violent crime per 100,000 residents higher in Shreveport last year than Washington, D.C.
There's a lot of good work that's been done. There's a lot of reasons for that, but we have a Democrat DA there who has not been prosecuting crime as some
Not
other
his
more
fault
aggressive
at
DAs
all.
have around the country.
He just has to
Whereas
blame the
for
other
individual
party.
to be elected.
He doesn't know how
I'll
to
say
do
that,
anything else, like
you know,
actually
it's
take
an urban
responsibility
area.
or
There's a lot of
do
problems
his
that
job.
happening around the country, and we have to address it.
So would the Guard help? If the Guard can help in D.C., the President has said he wants to send the Guard to
Wait,
Chicago
wait,
and other
whoa.
places. Why not Shreveport?
Hold on,
I don't know.
hold
That's
on,
not
hold on,
my
hold on.
call.
What is Berman doing with that follow-up?
What the media does, and this is how we got to be the #1 jailer of humanity on Earth, the United States of America, because
Yeah, the anchor there was basically egging him to do more fascist shit, which is insane.
yeah, he accepts the premises.
We didn't get to this yesterday, but Brandon Johnson went on Morning Joe. And Joe Scarborough had like 3 or 4 follow-ups about like, would you hire more cops? Like, and Brandon Johnson is going through a list of how violent crime has precipitously dropped, and they want to continue with their community investment efforts and like doing what they've been doing, which has been effective. And yet Scarborough would not let up over and over again. What is this follow-up? What do you mean the National Guard would help with the non-existent problem that you're presenting us? Insanity. Keep going.
I'll say that you know, it's an urban area that has a lot of problems that are happening around the country, and we have to address it.
So would the Guard help? If the Guard can help in D.C., the President has said he wants to send the Guard to Chicago and other places. Why not Shreveport?
I don't know. That's not my call.
Would you
it may
ask
be
him for that?
necessary. Well, I don't know. Let's take one city at a time and see. We have to address the crime problem in any city where
Pussy.
it is.
Can you
it's
pause
a problem like that.
So it's it's just whatever. We're good, but it's just like the right question would be is why are you not calling on the National Guard to go to Shreveport, and why are you like not saying would it help and making the case that they should do that? You should call out the hypocrisy without making a positive case for the National Guard. I know media critique is easy, but it's just like this is how these fascistic ideas.
It's easy
come
because they're
up,
also
and
fucking
you
shit
guys
at
go
it.
hum. This is the idea, the kind of thing we should seriously think about.
All these cities had massively higher crime 20 years ago. I mean, maybe not all of them, Tuti, but the ones that are talked about, like
Yes.
D.C. or Chicago or New York. And it wasn't appropriate to bring in the National Guard then either.
Right.
The things to do with crime are like we know
Cost
how
of
to
living.
exactly. We know what drives this stuff up. We know what drove it up quickly, and because all those things were exacerbated under COVID. Like,
but they
it's not cops.
It's not. But the point is that they are. It's not cops. It's cost of
Oh,
living.
hiccups.
It's people's desperation. You think people want to be criminals in their heart of hearts? Of course, there are people who are like organized criminals, and in fact, many of them are in the Trump administration right now. And they're people who are like the true crooks, abusing society, ransacking it for their own enrichment. But the people that are desperate and are committing crimes like this, and this is not violent crime, but it also has to do with like lack of healthcare services and mental health. And sometimes violent crime leads to like street gang or desperation leads to street gangs and modes of like creating an informal economy because our economy isn't working for those people, and that can lead to violence. That's how this is addressed.
People were stealing detergent
Yes.
for the resale value during COVID. Like that's a country failing.
Yeah. And obviously we don't even need to mention this. Violent crime is down nearly 11% compared to 2024 when there was already a precipitous drop in violent crime. So when they talk about crime in cities, it's a way to appeal to a base of white people who are afraid of their own shadow and who feel validated.
They were propagandized by Fox News and the other more liberal news organizations who didn't push back on the crime narrative or just accepted it and pushed it themselves.
Validated in their like kind of view of liberal degeneracy from suburbia, and it is nothing more than racist dog whistling that should be treated as such in our press, because everything that they're doing around this flies in the face of all of the available data, and they choose to focus on specific cities often run by black people or predominantly black in blue areas, because they are sending a message not just to the Nazis but to their base of support that is fundamentally fairly antisocial and believes that the most important thing that our political system provides them is low taxes on their suburban homes that are walled off from the rest of the hordes that they don't want associated with them unless they're working for them.
Philly with their progressive DA Larry Krasner has
The real like elitists are the right wingers who refuse to share anything, the air they breathe, with anyone who's brown or black or gay or trans, Muslim or anything.
a notable drop in homicide rate in the lowest, reaching the lowest level in decades, and the largest decline in gun violence among major U.S. cities.
Hey folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at...
While President Trump continues to see
Fox
success
News
with his
time.
crime crackdown in D.C., Democrats are struggling to tackle the narrative. Here are just a few ways the left has been talking about crime.
I would love
If Fox News loves showing that sort of footage, but they never actually contextualize where it is, when it happened, or any of that.
more federal support, but federal support on things that actually make sense and not things that are performative.
We are not the city that we want to be yet, but we are definitely better than we were during the president's first term.
He wants to convince the American public that we have a crime crisis in this country. We don't have a crime crisis in this country.
Okay. Despite this, a recent poll found that nearly 70% of Democrats
Just because it's seen as a problem by these people, again, doesn't mean it's an actual fucking problem. Christ, people.
do see crime.
Go
as
into a city
problem in
yourself.
large
You
cities. Yeah,
won't
call it a
experience
crisis.
crime
A former police officer
9
with
times out
this
of 10.
message to Democratic leaders.
Some of these governors, mayors who want to grandstand, I just wish that one day they would go and experience what it's like for the people that need the police the most. Go to the inner cities and just take a day, stay at the hotel, leave your security, back at the headquarters, and have a real experience of what people go through.
Oh my God, wouldn't that be amazing? I love that idea. There's a new opinion piece with the headline
Yeah, how about
Democrats
these fuckwads at Fox News do that first?
reaction to Trump's DC crime
Fucking moron.
crackdown puts them at odds with voters. An excerpt, the unhinged hostility to Donald Trump's successful crime crackdown in Washington, D.C., puts Democrats inexplicably on the wrong side of their voters. What on earth are they thinking? End quote. Luke Ball, former House Communications Director, Republican strategist, and Fred Hicks, Democratic strategist, join me now. Thank you both for talking to me. You heard the mayor, we've played it on this program and on Fox, of Chicago talk about how he really wants to keep his streets safe, yet he denies the fact that more police presence is necessary, and God forbid the National Guard go in there and help them clean up their crime rate. I'm going to start with you, Luke. I mean, do you think Democratic mayors and governors need to get on board?
They do, because this is not a left versus right issue. This is a life versus death issue. How can they seriously argue crime is under control while blood is flowing in their streets? It's probably why they're polling nationally among the American people at a 28% approval rating. I think monkeypox is polling.
No, they're polling at a 28 because they're spineless fucking morons who don't know how to resist a fascist administration to save their goddamn lives, literally.
It's a concerning direction for these folks to be going in, because if they win another election, look to the leaders of the party. Mamdani is the one sucking up all of the energy. That is the leader of the Democrat Party. And I'm concerned that Democrats are about 2 elections away.
He is not. He is the mayoral candidate in New York. And the actual heads of the Democratic Party, like Hakeem Jeffries and stuff, despite also being from New York, have refused to endorse him. So how the fuck is he the head of the party? You fucking moron.
From strapping Karl Marx to a defibrillator, waking him up and running him at the top of the ballot.
So fucking sick of these dipshit pieces of shit.
Abolish the police movement is not going to play well with voters who are independents and non-party affiliated as we head closer to the midterms.
Fred, he mentioned Mamdani, so I'm sorry, I can't ignore it. I mean, it is a scary.
I mean, you could ignore
to
it,
think
but
of another mayor coming into New York City and not supporting the police and not upholding law enforcement and funding to do so, because this whole anti-police movement is certainly not going to help crime rates.
Well, gosh, if any of that were true, then that would actually be scary. But the reality is that's not true. I was in Chicago, D.C. earlier this year. I'm in Atlanta right now, and I've not yet stepped in one single pool of blood. So I'm not sure what America and what major city Luke is referencing. And I'm not sure, even when I'm in New York City, what he's referencing.
Are you kidding?
And so with that being said.
Wait a minute. Okay, so you haven't stepped, you haven't, whoa. So you
whoa.
A pool of blood. Okay, I'll be honest with you. Neither have I, thank God. A lot of New Yorkers
fuck off, dumb fucking bitch.
have, and a lot of people in Chicago have. You have.
Have they? Have you even been to?
Seen the crime rates, right? I mean, in Chicago alone, you want to talk about Chicago? 52 people shot this weekend alone. Last weekend, 26. 7 people killed.
Where they're getting these numbers? They just like to say it, but where are they from?
Maybe you didn't step in it, but I tell you, the crime rates and statistics are facts. Why are you saying that you haven't? I think that's irresponsible.
Bitch is so fucking triggered right now. She needs to calm down.
The picture that Luke is painting is one that is not representative of what's happening in America. Is there crime? Absolutely. Should crime be dealt with? Absolutely. Are Democrats anti-police and defunders? No. Brandon Johnson's not a defunder. Karen Bass is not a defunder. Andre Dickens in Atlanta is not a defunder. But the reality and where Democrats have a problem is that we're not actually taking into account what's happening when we talk about what the administration is doing. Thank you for intervening. Thank you for being about solving crime. But guess what? There's crime in cities that are not Democratic-led. There's crime in red states all across the country. But we don't see this administration talking about going into or going to other places like that. He's only talking about Democratic-led cities. And lest we be confused about his point, he has actually said that he wants to go into Democratic cities. And that's the problem. He's bringing policing and he's bringing law and order. He's bringing law enforcement into parties and politics.
There
and
is
that's
crime
not okay.
in all
Focus on the
cities.
issues.
And I didn't say that there's no crime in red cities. There is red crime. There is crime in red cities. I'm sorry. I'm still thinking about your pool of blood
So
comment.
why are we not sending the National Guard there?
Okay,
so Fred, let me say this.
absolutely. If it's needed, then they should.
If we're talking about red states, that's one thing. You've brought up red states, but you also then just mentioned a blue city with relation to crime. That's the major issue here. And in D.C., where I am right now and where I've lived in and around for years, every single day we have some sort of a shooting. It gets closer and closer to our nation's capital. A lot of the people doing these shootings are 12, 13, and 14-year-olds. There are murders happening everywhere, and maybe we don't hear about it all the time because the Democrat politicians have normalized it. And that is a humongous issue.
Humongous.
No, they have by ignoring it, Fred. They have normalized it by ignoring it and not doing anything. And now
better
that
than that,
this
Luke.
president
You're
has
mixing-
taken action to do something, you guys are not paying attention to it.
Fred?
You're mixing partisanship and policing, and those two should not go together. If we're going to be about keeping America safe, which we should be, then let's do that wherever the crime happens to be. Do not, as the president has said, focus on, make the focus about democratic cities. Say, listen, I'm going to go where the data indicates it, and that's what we're going to do, what we need to do. Because guess what? A life lost in Chicago is just as valuable as a life lost somewhere in a red city or in a red section. And so we're not seeing a data-driven approach to it, and that's the problem. The president has been very explicit. It's not up for debate. He has stated very clearly that this is about partisanship for him. He wants to go into democratic cities, and that is my problem. That's the problem the
Democratic
Democrats have.
cities are failing
Uh-huh.
America, and they are not tackling their crime, and the highest concentration of murders.
Yeah, this guy doesn't fucking know how to do anything but recite lines that he has drilled into his head by fucking Trump's dick. Jesus Christ.
And bloodshed is in these higher concentrated areas. Yes, it means that we're going to have
Homicides. I'm in
crime.
Atlanta. Homicides have fallen 30% since COVID here in the city of Atlanta, and in Washington D.C. They've fallen, and all across the country. And these democratic cities, if you look at
Violent crime statistics have been dropping for decades.
where the crime rate was, particularly the homicide rate over the last 5 years, the homicide rate has fallen. It has not increased. It has not spiked. That is what the data showed. So let's be real and let's be honest with people.
Yes, I think the honesty is that everybody agrees that crime needs to continue to come down. I mean, a
Shit-eating
homicide rate coming
fucker.
down to 20% is great, but let's get it down even further. And I think, that should be the focus.
Let's get it to zero.
All right,
Let's
I
get it to
agree with
zero.
you 100%. Luke Ball and Fred Hicks, thank you both. Appreciate it.
Thank y'all.
I'm Steve Ducey.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. Russian leader
Getting
Vladimir
into
Putin is in
Putin
China for a security
or
summit
Fox.
where he and Chinese President Xi Jinping are sharing their vision for a new global order, fueling fears of an authoritarian push. The autocratic leaders meeting as President Trump is pushing for peace in Ukraine. Joining me now is World Strat President and the Chief Editor of the Middle East Forum, Jim Hansen. Jim, thanks for talking to us about this morning. You know, it's not looking likely that Putin is going to be meeting this deadline, which Trump has referenced 2 weeks ago.
This guy okay? Look at his eyes. The hell?
And then Emmanuel Macron, as well as Zelensky, they've also referenced this deadline, which is supposed to be today. You know, what's going to happen if Putin just kind of blows through this deadline? I mean, what does that mean for the future of peace talks?
You know, President Trump has been accused of being Putin's puppet, but I don't think Vladimir Putin really wants to get crosswise with Donald Trump right now. Trump's on a roll. He has steamrolled anybody who has gotten in his way. So I don't think he'll hesitate if Putin does refuse to make this deadline or refuse to set a meeting to cause some problems for him. And Russia's not stable enough to be able to withstand the actual full force of U.S. power, economic, diplomatic, you know, and there's no threat of military force right now other than keeping Ukraine going. But if we start to cause them trouble economically, that causes Putin trouble at home.
The thing is, we can't really cause trouble to Russia anymore economically. We've already sanctioned everything they do to all hell. There's nothing left to really sanction except sanction either common trading partners we have or allies we have, which is just going to hurt allies more and thus, you know, make them not want to be our ally.
That he can't afford.
So you
Look
think
at India, who is also at this summit meeting with China.
consequences for Putin?
Oh, no doubt. There are a lot of things we can do to cause them difficulty with trade, to cause them, you know, we could remove them from the banking system as almost a non-violent nuclear option. So there's a lot of ways to make life difficult for Putin. And I think President Trump has shown he is willing to make tough decisions in the short term that lead to long-term results rather than just making politically expedient choices. So I like I said, I don't think Vlad wants to get in on Donald's bad list.
Yeah, I mean, and Friday, Putin apparently told Russian officials
Yeah,
that he's open to these talks.
I don't know what fucking reality this guy is living in, as if Trump is some sort of strong man who's going to force Putin to do anything delusional.
Whether or not that's going to happen, do you think that this can still happen today? Do you think he's going to get this close to this deadline and be like, you know what, maybe we should do this? Because this is the second time that Trump's tried to do this between the two.
Yeah, doing it on the last day in Putin's mind may make him seem weak. So he may decide to push it off a day or two and go ahead and set something next week. But I don't think he's going to refuse to do it. I think the time has come both for him and Zelensky to realize that the end game to this war is where things stand right now. Russia keeps the territory it has. Zelensky accepts that and gets some guarantees from the Euros and a little bit of backing from us on the security front.
So what do you think about Kim Jong-un visiting China for the first time in the last 6 years?
Yeah, that's actually kind of interesting. Kim's been quiet, in most ways. I don't think anybody wants him to get lively again and start lobbing rockets and doing things to destabilize things in the Pacific Rim. I don't think there's any real concern, that he's going to be a major player. But you've got a guy who's willing to launch rockets, who's got nuclear weapons, and who's someone we don't want causing trouble. And the Chinese want that as another problem for President Trump to deal with, to give them leverage. So it's concerning.
Guy has no idea what China wants. He's just making shit up.
I don't think anything bad will come in the long term, but it's something to keep our eyes on.
Well, and when you talk about bad in the long term, I mean, what does this mean for Americans? Do you think any of this is anything for Americans to worry about, whether it be financial
Without
or
a doubt.
from a war front?
Yeah, a war being the absolute worst case scenario, but the idea that there's trouble in the Pacific Rim that our allies in that region have to consider if China and potentially North Korea are some sort of alliance causing trouble there, then they have to wonder: do we make better friendships with China, or can the U.S. Be a better alternative? I think they will all come to the conclusion that we are the better answer, but we have to show that.
Are we though?
Yeah, we do. I mean, one thing's for sure: Trump's got his hands full with these two, trying to get them to talk. That is for sure. Jim Hansen, thank you so much for your time this morning. We appreciate it.
Good to be with you.
I'm Steve Ducey.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart.
Hey,
Joining
or
us now,
Putin.
Ambassador Michael Carpenter, former
MSNBC.
NSC Senior Director for Europe. And Ambassador, first, what do you make of the timing of this gathering there in China and the message that these leaders are trying to send?
Well, I think the timing is very fortuitous for Indian Prime Minister Modi, because he's able to now leverage the fact that Trump has imposed these 50% tariffs on India and show up at this meeting, as you said, with President Putin of Russia, with Xi Jinping of China, and be seen as someone among equals with like-mindeds, even as he's being spurned by the United States. And so I think for Modi, this is a big opportunity, but also, of course, for Putin and for Xi and the other dictators who will show up in China, this is an opportunity to sort of reaffirm the axis of aggressors, or the axis of autocrats, if you will, and their cooperation in the defense of their regimes against what they see as democratic encroachment. Now, the democratic world is at the same time sort of much less cohesive than it has been in the past, because you have President Trump, who has made overtures to President Putin, but not so much to fellow democracies in Europe.
So French President Emmanuel Macron says if today's deadline passes without any action, quote, it means that once again President Putin played President Trump. All Putin has said so far today is that he's reached understandings with Trump over ending the war in Ukraine at that summit we saw in Alaska. So in your opinion, is the president being played? What happens next here?
Well, I think with the upshot of the meeting in Alaska was that essentially President Trump gave President Putin a permission slip to continue the bombing in Ukraine, which he has done. In fact, the bombing under the 7 months of the Trump administration has been more intense and more damaging, especially in Ukrainian cities, than at any point previously during the war. And so essentially by letting this deadline for imposing costs on Russia come and go, President Trump is allowing President Putin to continue this effort to bomb Ukraine into submission. And it doesn't appear that that is going to change anytime soon. And so no matter what happens with subsequent meetings and potentially a trilateral summit with the U.S., Ukraine, and Russia, it's unlikely that Putin is going to give up on his demands that he continue to subjugate Ukraine.
Well, and we, of course, saw President Trump also threaten economic war against Russia if they didn't acquiesce to at least having these talks. And clearly that has so far not worked.
Yeah, but he hasn't really imposed any of those notional costs on Russia. So he's talked about potentially tariffs on Russia. He's talked about potentially increasing sanctions, especially targeting Russian oil revenues. But in reality, we haven't seen any of that play out. So there's been zero tariffs on Russia. There have been tariffs on just about every country in the world except Russia. We haven't seen additional sanctions. We haven't seen additional cost imposition measures. And so Putin must be smiling in the Kremlin and thinking to himself, this is great. I just get to continue what I've been doing all along with absolutely zero repercussions.
What do you make of the dynamic now on the global stage where you see lack of implications or impact from Trump on Russia, but then you see tariffs leveled at allies like India, and then you see India cozying up to...
So I'm pretty sure these people aren't this stupid that they don't know that we already have sanctions on Russia and we don't really have a way to add more sanctions, and that by sanctioning India, we're trying to hurt Russian oil sales. You know, they are our ally.
Russia and China, and
They are
that
just
so-called
stupid.
axis of upheaval there in China. So what do you make of all of that, and how dire could that be for our own national interests?
Well, you know, what's interesting with the tariffs that were imposed on India, so those were ostensibly because India was purchasing Russian oil, but larger consumers of Russian oil, such as China or Turkey, were spared those sanctions. And so I think the Indian Prime Minister Modi saw this as a real affront, and that's why he is now trying to make common cause with China, even though they have a very complex relationship, including hostilities in 2020, but also with Russia's Vladimir Putin. All of these leaders are able to draw closer together right now because they see lack of unity within the Democratic camp, if you wish, on the larger global stage. So the United States, which has traditionally been the leader of democratic forces around the world, is much less willing to play that role. And so I think for all of these dictators, this is a real opportunity for them to advance their goals.
Okay. Ambassador Michael Carpenter, thank you so much for your analysis. We appreciate it.
Chinese President Xi Jinping and Russian President Vladimir Putin set out their vision for a new global security and economic order in a direct challenge to the United States at a regional summit on Monday. At the two-day summit in the Chinese port city of Tianjin for the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, Xi said the more than 20 leaders of non-Western countries must continue to take a clear stand against hegemonism and power politics and practice true multilateralism. Despite no concrete policies being set out, Xi's comments are a veiled attack on the current US-dominated world order. Putin, whose country has forged close ties with China amid the fallout from the Ukraine war, said the SCO had revived genuine multilateralism, with national currencies increasingly used in mutual settlements rather than the US dollar. Earlier, Xi pushed for more inclusive economic globalization amid the upheaval caused by US President Donald Trump's tariff policies. Trump's tariff war has disproportionately affected developing economies such as India, whose exports were hit with a 50% levy last week. Putin and India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi held hands as they met before the summit and appeared jovial together as they spoke with Xi, surrounded by translators. At a bilateral meeting, Putin addressed Modi as his dear friend and said relations were developing dynamically, while Modi told Putin he hopes Russia and Ukraine will move forward to end their war soon.
Mr. President, this demonstrates just how profound and comprehensive our specially privileged strategic partnership truly is. Even under the most challenging circumstances, India and Russia have always moved forward shoulder to shoulder. Our close cooperation matters not only for the peoples of our two nations, but also for ensuring global peace, stability, and prosperity.
China and India are the biggest buyers of crude oil from Russia, the world's second largest exporter.
I just resigned from my role as Chief Medical Officer at the CDC.
We're now getting into the CDC with RFK trying to destroy our vaccines and them illegal. Have more pandemics. And he can sell bogus other cures.
Tipping point around the dismantling of public health in our country and the weaponization of the work that we do.
Several senior CDC leaders resigned after the White House fired CDC Director Susan Menares.
She was not aligned with the president's mission to make America healthy again.
I have great fears that our nation is incredibly vulnerable now for public health threats.
The message it sends is that scientific integrity isn't as important as political expediency. This is a red flag.
Susan Menares has a background in the federal government and health leadership. She was just sworn in at the end of July.
When Dr. Menares joined the agency, we were excited to have scientific leadership that would lead us around rigorous and transparent efforts.
Just hours before CDC Director Menares was removed, former acting CDC Director Richard Besser spoke with her.
She relayed a conversation she had had with Secretary Kennedy. He told her directly that he wanted her to fire her leadership team and that he wanted her to agree to approve any recommendations that came out of the newly constructed Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices. She said she would only approve recommendations that were based on the best science and best evidence. She was told to resign and she refused and said that she expected to be fired pretty soon.
There's a lot of trouble at CDC, and it's going to require getting rid of some people over the long term.
Lawyers for Menares said that she was fired for protecting the public over serving a political agenda.
If our scientific leader couldn't do what needed to be done, we were going to be ineffective. So Dimitri, Dan, and I decided that if Dr. Menares was leaving CDC, we would too. And we needed to do this together to show the agency, to show the nation how concerned we were about this.
It's highly unusual to see this rapid transition of a CDC director. And really what it says is a message about scientific expertise being summarily dismissed when it's politically convenient.
Secretary Kennedy wrote an email to CDC employees on August 28th saying that reform does not diminish the CDC's mission, it strengthens it.
We need strong leadership that will go in there and that will be able to execute on President Trump's broad ambitions.
CDC is
The shit
not
about
a
President
partisan
Trump's
agency.
ambition.
It's apolitical. It's a national health security agency that's looking out for the health of each and every person within our community without a political lens or bias.
I was optimistic when I took on that role that I could align with President Trump and Secretary Kennedy's initiatives and had read many of their materials. For me, the issue became when we couldn't stand behind scientific integrity and there was political interference. In my resignation letter, I talked about changes I was concerned about. That includes the proposed budget cuts and the reorganization, as I know that those will significantly worsen our nation's health.
CDC has been in a vulnerable position on a lot of these things because it never really did have a full authorizing piece of legislation that said this is what the CDC is and does. It's kind of grown by bits and pieces over the years, and so it's been very vulnerable to these kinds of budget and job cut attacks. A day after Menares was let go, the White House selected Deputy Secretary of HHS Jim O'Neill to be the acting CDC director. O'Neill is currently the Deputy Secretary at HHS. He was also recently confirmed by the Senate.
The Centers of Disease Control and Prevention Director usually is a senior public health official who has significant scientific expertise, but also leadership expertise and political acumen.
He's a healthcare investor. He's not a doctor. He doesn't have medical training. RFK Jr. really trusts Jim O'Neill. He has been working with him since the transition. He's viewed as a true believer and a good soldier and someone who can do the bidding of both RFK Jr. and his MAHA agenda as well as President Trump's MAGA agenda.
I worry that Mr. O'Neill will move forward with the Secretary's public health agenda. And the Secretary's public health agenda is extremely detrimental to the health of people in America.
Secretary Kennedy and others in the Trump administration have voiced this strong desire to see CDC just focus on infectious disease and not do anything else. So no more gun violence, no more drowning, no more infant deaths, kind of focus and research that it's done for a number of years now.
There's a new case of the measles in Williams County.
The Hawaii Department of Health is investigating a confirmed travel-related case of Zika virus.
This is one of the most concerning times I've ever seen for health in America. We're seeing diseases come back that were well controlled. I think for us to get back to a point where the CDC is able to do its job, the administration is going to have to decide that that's what's important. I fear that's not going to happen until people lose their lives.
I think the solutions are for Congress to get involved. We need to ensure there's adequate resources for CDC. We need to stop terminations and bring back staff, ensure that there's enough boots on the ground in communities and local and state health departments, as well as at CDC, to protect the public. And we also have to ensure that there's a continued commitment and support for scientific integrity and data quality.
Republicans in general have been very critical of CDC since the pandemic, but we have seen with the turmoil in the last week, Senator Susan Collins from Maine and Senator Bill Cassidy from Louisiana voice concern about what's been happening.
One of the most important things that could happen going forward is looking at how we can depoliticize the CDC.
Kennedy is scheduled to testify before the Senate Finance Committee on September 4th. The meeting is about just the president's healthcare agenda, but Kennedy has been getting a lot of heat on what's going on at the CDC, and Democrats have already stated their intention to grill him about that.
Now, the greatest risk to public health is not the next pathogen, it's the erosion of trust that we're seeing in our communities for scientific expertise.
A federal appeals court ruled that President Trump overstepped his authority when he used emergency powers
Updates
to
on the
launch
tariffs.
sweeping tariffs in April. Now, as you heard, White House trade advisor Peter Navarro says they're ready to take the case all the way to the Supreme Court. On Friday, the panel ruled that the power to impose tariffs lies in fact with Congress, the appeals court did, not the president. Joining us now, MSNBC White House correspondent Akayla Gardner and CNBC senior analyst and commentator and publisher of The Message of the Markets on Substack, Ron Insana. So, Akayla, what authority does the president believe he has despite this ruling?
Well, the president believes he has sweeping authority. And as you said, he's promising to take this case to the Supreme Court where it's likely to go. This federal appeals court essentially said that their use of an Emergency Powers Act known as IEPA was not valid. And this upheld an earlier decision by the Court of International Trade. But for now, these tariffs remain in effect until October 14. And we should clarify this only affects some of the president's tariffs. That's including reciprocal tariffs, those really broad sweeping tariffs we've seen imposed on dozens of countries, and also those fentanyl trafficking tariffs, which affect Canada, Mexico, and China. Those remain in effect. What still is allowed that they're saying is the steel and aluminum tariffs, those sectoral tariffs, if you will, on semiconductors and pharmaceuticals. Also some tariffs that President Trump imposed in his first term.
So your drugs are going to be more expensive, like medical drugs, as well as your computer parts and the like.
Biden also notably let those in, and they're still allowing him to revoke this de minimis rule, which essentially allows small or low price goods to come into the United States without being affected by tariffs. Those still will be ended.
All right, Ron, tariffs so far, effective, ineffective? What's it going to mean if the country has to pay back tariffs it's already levied?
Well, we don't know exactly how much has been collected. It's somewhere between $100 and $150 billion, Katie. And businesses, as I understand it, would have to apply for rebates in order to get any of the duties, customs duties or import taxes that they've already paid refunded to them. And that might take us well into next year with respect to that. So it's still a rather complicated picture. None of it becomes clear unless or until the Supreme Court makes a decision. The one thing I will say is if they are indeed rolled back, unlike what Peter Navarro and President Trump have both said, this will not end the United States. World War II didn't do that. The Depression didn't do that. Even the Civil War, for all intents and purposes, didn't do that. So the hyperbole is beyond belief, I think, in this regard. This is a relatively disruptive series of events, but it would not spell the end of the United States if they were overturned.
Maybe I wonder if this is a question for a lawyer, but I'm going to ask it to you, Ron. If you are an individual citizen who's paid a tariff, say the company didn't levy the tariff on their prices, but you had to pay UPS, the shipper, how would you go about getting your money back if these are overturned?
This is a tough question. I'm not sure it's possible. You'd have to go and petition the company from which you bought a particular product and then determine by how much that product was marked up, if they did it at all during this initial period here, to determine whether or not you are eligible for a refund. And then the company has to go along with it. I don't know what the legal mechanisms are for individuals getting that money back, but there is a series of, I should say, an avenue of redress for companies to get those import taxes refunded if indeed it comes to pass.
Kayla, I'm going to put up a headline from the Wall Street Journal. The middle class vibe has shifted from secure to squeezed. After months of tracking high-income earners' positive economic outlook, Americans' middle-income households appear to be losing confidence. I mean, that's just one of many different headlines that convey that the tariffs are not exactly making people feel good. Is the White House paying any attention to this? Are they sensitive to it?
They're definitely sensitive
We've seen in
to
the
it.
data, inflation hasn't really seen significant uptick yet with tariffs, but that might not be true for the long term. We could see that change by the end of the year, perhaps early next year. But something that I'm watching particularly is if the Supreme Court rules on this perhaps next year, early winter, spring. If they say President Trump is not allowed to move forward with these tariffs, will the president then go to Republicans in Congress and ask them to implement that? And this could put them in a very politically sticky situation. We've seen Republicans say time and time again that they've heard from their constituents, even if they support the tariffs, that they're feeling squeezed or that they're worried about how the tariffs are going to impact their wallet. So that could put them in a very sticky situation. We know the Constitution says Congress does have this power explicitly to impose tariffs. So that's something that I'm watching if we're going to see ultimately the White House turn to Capitol Hill.
Is the stock market sensitive to this, Ron? I mean, I know they're riding high right now on AI futures, but are they going to be reacting to consumer confidence?
Well, I think there's two things that the market's riding high on, as you say, or getting high on its own supply, as it were. Number one is the AI build out, the boom, the data centers, all of the infrastructure that's going along with artificial intelligence being more rapidly deployed. And then number two, the prospects for an interest rate cut in September from the Federal Reserve has added a little extra incentive for individuals to buy stocks or institutions as well. So those are the two primary things. Now, how this decision affects the market tomorrow morning remains to be seen, because to a certain extent, if indeed the tariffs were to be rolled back, that could mean less inflationary pressure and more room for the Federal Reserve to cut rates on a sustained basis. So I think we're going to have to go through this kind of step by step to see how equity markets and bond markets respond to what happened late Friday night.
All right. Quick video on the Epstein updates before doing some longer form videos, probably maybe just one.
To Ehud Barak, while the latter two are in Russia in 2013. Can I send you his email, Sultan bin Sulayem? Any idea how to create the actual contact? My friend Sultan bin Sulayman is in St. Pete. I think you should meet. He is the right hand of Maktoum. It's so funny that like the TrueAnon account, in between Brace's like insane AI posting and in between his like incessant reply guy behavior as a bit, will post absolute bangers like profoundly important pieces of journalism. We got it all, baby. Here's a leak to Ehud Barak's emails, 100,000 emails where you can see him and Jeffrey Epstein talking about meeting Peter Thiel, who owns Palantir. You can download the whole thing on DDO Secrets via our Telegram. Here's an additional 25,000 leaked emails from Deputy Minister Benny Gantz, an additional 50,000 leaked emails from Gabby Ashkenazi. Ian Carroll showed you some clever tech and discovered that Jeffrey Epstein and Ehud Barak were conducting surveillance on a number of powerful U.S. politicians and businesses. Yeah, I don't care about Ian Carroll. I'm sorry. I don't think he's credible. Anyway, a busy day in June of 2014 as Jeffrey Epstein and Ehud Barak jiggle meetings with Victor Vekselberg and Peter Thiel. Both Vekselberg and Thiel would later invest in separate Israeli spyware companies. Peter is Monday at 8 p.m., Victor. And before 6 p.m., is Peter coming around 7 p.m.? Yes, definitely after 3 best. Jeff, I'll meet VV in some 2 hours time. He probably stays on New York till Monday. Bro, this guy couldn't write for Does it make sense to have a cup of coffee with him on Sunday? EB. I'm returning to New York Sunday morning now, so have time Sunday if you want. In a separate email to billionaire Gary Fiegel, Ehud Barak says he's actually met Thiel once at Davos, but Thiel likely doesn't remember as he was, I guess, under some drug impact. It's so strange. What was Ehud Barak, former Prime Minister of Israel, doing with Jeffrey Epstein? Why were they consistently talking to one another? Why were they emailing one another about linking up with Palantir's very own Peter Thiel? Why does the Israeli state utilize Peter Thiel's surveillance technology? Why does the American state utilize Peter Thiel's surveillance technology, Palantir? How very strange. How could this have happened? Interesting. Certainly not a Mossad operative, certainly not connected deeply to the Israeli state. That would be crazy. Don't you say that. Oh, no, no, no. I wonder how this happened. Anyway, them billionaires really do got a lot of things together. Yeah, they're just chilling. They're hanging out. They are certainly not connected, though. It's so funny that this came right after Ghislaine Maxwell was like, yeah, I think they might have met Ehud Barak. I think she might have met Ehud Barak, but she doesn't know.
Told you think that Mr. Epstein was getting any money from any intelligence agency, including Mossad?
Well, I don't believe so, but I wouldn't know. I mean, I would be very surprised if he did. I don't think so. No.
We've talked about a lot of names, and I'm sure there's some that we haven't covered. Are there any?
So why did he have a Saudi passport? How'd that happen? Who amongst us doesn't have a Saudi passport? Jeffrey Epstein was doing the pilgrimage. It's one of the pillars of Islam. That's right. He had said the Shahada and found the light of Allah. Has she ever been in contact with a Mossad operative? Oh, not voluntarily, not knowingly. How could I know? These connections, I mean, you're just making stuff up. Please don't. Anyway, let's look at the Epstein article on Reason now. Yeah, this is from Matthew Petty, who had access to the treasure trove of hacked emails and wrote about it. Inside Jeffrey Epstein's spy industry connections, leaked emails show Epstein's attempt to dabble in security tech across borders. Is there anything I'm missing? Because I feel like that was the gist of it. Epstein having consistent back and forth communication with Ehud Barak. By the way, one thing that these files do is push back against Tucker Carlson's theory that Ehud Barak was Epstein's intelligence handler. Whatever Epstein was up to before his emails with Barak read line from someone on the outside of that world trying to get back in. Matthew Petty's assessment is that Jeffrey Epstein, at least with these conversations, with this back and forth, seemingly was not in the know at that point. Or maybe like Ehud Barak wasn't his handler, but clearly had a close relationship with the Israeli state. So he could have been an asset for a while and wasn't active, or he could have been an asset for a different division, and he was trying to elevate his importance in the Israeli state, in the eyes of the Israeli state, by directly talking to Ehud Barak, by setting up additional things for Ehud Barak. This doesn't mean that he wasn't an Israeli asset. He very clearly is an Israeli asset. I don't think a member of the Mossad would also be directly emailing Ehud Barak on a private email server. You know, I suspect that they have better OPSEC than that. Maybe they don't. I don't know. Maybe they're that stupid. But it feels to me like that's not a thing that they would do. But of course, a simple financial advisor is not doing this kind of shit, I don't think. He talks with the Israeli email consistently about Putin invading Ukraine in 2014 and 2015. Reportedly, a startup focused on overhauling 9/11 emergency dispatch technology could bring Epstein into that world. One of his co-founders and directors was Pinchas Bucharest, a former director of Unit 8200. Bucharest told Haaretz, the Israeli newspaper that broke news of Epstein's involvement in 2019, that the investment was structured to conceal Epstein's role. Barak brought the money, and as far as I'm concerned, it's his. I don't know Epstein, and I haven't met him. Yet the emails show that Barak scheduled a virtual meeting with Epstein and Bucharest together in December 2014 and told his lawyers to alter the terms of the investment based on Bucharest's input. After Epstein's rearrest in July 2019, Barak announced that he was dissolving the investment partnership with Epstein. Neither Barak nor Bucharest are still on the board of the company. In April 2016, Barak asked Epstein to invest in Levitation, an electromagnetic imaging startup. Couldn't see a product. They don't have it yet, but they're leading experts on advanced radars, made sci-fi-like achievements in military products, Barak wrote, adding that Levitation staff were all veterans of the Israeli weapons company Rafael Advanced Defense Systems. Levitation received part of the $1.5 million contract with the U.S. Department of Homeland Security in 2020 for developing electromagnetic imaging and artificial intelligence to detect threats and concealed items in wide open areas. The company went out of business in 2022. Gideon Levita, a former Iron Dome missile defense engineer, is now running a similar startup called Scanary. His promise is to perform mass airport security style scans of crowds using miniaturized radar. Barak offered use of the same construct we use in Reporty with Levitation. Oh my God, these names are so stupid. And Epstein agreed to have Barak's lawyer negotiate terms. Levita tells Reason via a colleague that Ehud Barak has never been an investor in Levitation, and added Jeffrey Epstein was never mentioned in any context related to the company. The emails also contain some tantalizing hints at Epstein's other international endeavors. Epstein told Barak about a business prospect he heard about from Britain's Prince Andrew, who has recently come under fire for his ties to an alleged Chinese spy. Wealthy Chines looking forward to start Personnel Protection Co. in Beijing. Kidnapping has begun. Barak did not respond to multiple requests for comment sent to his personal email, to his wife, to the lawyer who represented him in these business negotiations, and to the American Speakers Agency that represents him now. Neither did McCormick, Vexelberg, Belyakov, Bucharest, Carbon, British Royal Court, I saw a business opportunity, Barack told Haaretz in 2019 in a later interview with the Wall Street Journal. At the time, seemed to be an intelligent person, socially well-connected, and of a wide areas of interest from science to geopolitics, and said he did not participate or know about any of Epstein's parties with women or girls. Thiel acknowledged the Wall Street Journal in 2023 that he had met with Epstein more than once in 2014 for unnamed networking opportunities. The report did not mention Barack's involvement. I think enough about what Epstein's agenda might have been, Thiel told the paper. Interesting, this is all popping off as my 2019 report on Peter Thiel Epstein and Ehud Barak's Carbine 9/11 was just ultra vindicated by new release emails. Report on this yesterday, and this is the 2019 report. How the CIA, Mossad, and the Epstein network are exploiting mass shootings to create an Orwellian nightmare. Part of the reason why I don't like Ian Carroll is because he, from what I've seen so far, has like kind of bastardized Whitney Webb's work. Like exploiting mass shootings as in like to create an environment of mass surveillance. It directly ties back to the guy that we just saw on Fox News the other day say we're launching an Israeli-grade surveillance apparatus to ensure that mass shootings don't happen ever again.
I am now about to launch Gideon, America's first ever AI threat detection platform built specifically for law enforcement. It scrapes the internet 24/7 using an Israeli-grade ontology to pull specific threat language and then routes it to local law enforcement. It's a 24/7 detective. It never sleeps, and it's going to get us in front of these attacks.
This is it. Israeli-grade ontology. But don't worry, it's already begun. I mean, Peter Thiel has access to all of that. So conservatives in 1999 and 2024 until 2024. Enough of this emotional blackmail about school shootings to take away our rights. Conservatives in 2025. We need a joint Palantir Mossad OpenAI surveillance system immediately. And it's crazy because like it really does work. Like you can just be Republican and be like, we are going to do the exact same things that you've been warning that the Democrats were going to do for years. And we're just going to do it openly, but we're going to do it as Republicans and you will like it. And many people don't even bat an eye. They're like, oh, that's awesome. I love that. I think that's the best thing that we could have done. Why haven't I thought of that before? Amazing. I guess it owns the libs now, you know? The libs are super owned.
Epstein's emails with former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak are being made public for the first time, and they're generally just about how the two of them wanted to start surveillance companies together, how Epstein was organizing meetings between Barak and people like Peter Thiel, the owner of Palantir, a surveillance company that is increasingly involving itself with American and other Western governments. And you also have some really crazy ones like this, where Epstein says, with civil unrest exploding in Ukraine, Syria, Somalia, Libya, and the desperation of those in power, isn't this perfect for you? And there's also this one where Epstein says, Wevy Chines looking for to start personal protection company in Beijing.
I think he meant like wealthy Chinese. Kidnapping has begun. Wow, it turns out
Epstein
maybe
couldn't
he is
fucking
a
write.
Chinese spy after all. Just
Kidnapping
kidding.
has begun. These were released to the public by hackers. They are confirmed to be 100% real. And if you want to read a full article about it, check out Matthew Petty's article. But you can also check out TrueAnon on Twitter, who are about to do an episode about this. And I think many people thought that this was going to be about how Epstein was blackmailing Israelis. But in many ways, it's more horrifying, because what it actually is about how Epstein, after being convicted of heinous crimes, was basically using his position and his social connections to invest in mass surveillance companies that are increasingly going to dominate Western society.
Yeah.
Security people did not come to Epstein's island. And then Epstein is talking about how he wants their NYPD contact information so he can probably clear it with them that they can't go to the island. I mean, a lot of questions here. What was going on? Why did Ehud Barak not want his security to come? If the women there were over the age of 18, something funny going on there. This was just made public by the people's hero, Brace Belden of TrueAnon, on Twitter, because journalists now have access to a huge trove of hacked, verified documents about Epstein's relationship with Ehud Barak, and there are many other things in there. So likely, over the coming days, we're going to finally find out some more about Jeffrey Epstein. Maybe we'll finally find out what Trump was doing with him.
Welcome to Pod Save America. I'm John Favreau.
Cool.
I'm John Lovett. I'm Dan Pfeiffer.
I'll probably do this one, and I might actually call it a little early tonight because I'm stomach's a bit upset, but we'll try and get to the last video.
Tommy Vitor.
Happy Labor Day, everyone.
Thank you.
To mark the occasion, we thought we'd pre-record an episode where we take some of your questions, especially because we have now hit the 1,000th episode
on this exact day
of Pod Save America. We did it. We saved America. Saved. Let's pack it up and go home.
Months of conversation about whether or not this was really the 1,000th. There's zero chance it is, but
no. And well, also, by the way, doesn't 1,000 episodes feel like somehow like too many, but also not enough? Like it feels like we've done more, but also how come we've done that many?
We got to keep podcasting until this thing's
too many takes.
Yeah, got to keep going. On a slightly serious note, the absolute best part of doing this for the last 8.5 years has been all of you. Not you three. People
Thank you, John.
You're cool too.
You gestured forward, but it was towards the people.
Yeah, it's the people who are out there. But like getting to hear from a lot of you, getting to meet a lot of you, knowing that a lot of you get to meet each other through the show, and especially seeing how many of you chose not to just listen to us while we whine about
Don't
politics,
cry,
but actually get involved yourselves, which is the entire reason we started doing this. So thank you.
Yeah, and so some folks sent in some great stories that were inspiring, and we hope we could tell them, and maybe that will inspire even more of you to give it a shot, run for office, maybe get involved. Isabel told us she started with the pod as a 13-year-old when her dad would play it in the car on the way to school. Sorry about the
sorry.
She's 13 in America. I think
I've been working on limiting my F-bombs. Doing my best, Isabel.
All right,
Isabel's dad.
Yeah.
You too.
Trad wife over here.
Isabel,
just turning his butter.
Now in college.
Gosh darn this Trump.
Political science. Isabel's in college. That does make me feel old. Becky said she'd never met another Democrat before she started volunteering as a poll worker. Now she has a community. Jess M went back to school as a single mom of twins to teach history and government and says she plans to run for office in 2028.
That's cool.
Bidco, real name, we're told, ran for city council and lost, ran again and won, and is still door knocking for other candidates. And then JK, which is the most likely to be a fake name in all of these, ran for city council, came up 2 votes short, won a seat for the county board, and now really enjoys working with the person that beat them the first time.
No way, that's a great story.
How about that?
Look at that. Hello. So we appreciate everybody that has already signed up to run, but for everybody else, we are recruiting people through Vote Save America to run for local office in North Carolina, Texas, and Arizona. And for everybody else, we have a lot of big races coming up. We have the redistricting in California. We have an incredibly exciting, inspiring candidate in New York running against Mamdani. We've got there's statewide races in Pennsylvania, in Georgia. There's a Virginia governor's races in Michigan, governor's race.
Dan's primary in Chris Coons.
Yeah,
nice.
I'm sorry.
No.
Giving up my residency.
Someone did ask in one of the questions who's going to run Dan's campaign. So we got a couple of those.
Okay, maybe I can move back.
I'm not a details guy, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I want to be on the message calls like X. Yeah. I want to just think big thoughts and let other people deal with it.
Do a narrative.
Who's chewing in the background? Oh, let's love it.
Yeah. Look, if there's anybody that should say, I'm sorry, I'm not on the call, I dropped a donut into my phone, it would be me.
Yeah. But I will send a lot of thoughts via email to your younger staff afterwards.
Who forgets to put the call on mute when they order a breakfast sandwich?
I'll fill that role. So again, if you want to sign up to run in Arizona, North Carolina, or Texas, go to votesaveamerica.com/run, or just go to votesaveamerica.com because there's a lot of ways you can help even in these upcoming elections.
All right, let's get to some questions. There were a few questions about the midterm, so let's start there. Katie R asks, Dan, with 2026 coming, I'm nervous about getting sucked into over-optimistic interpretations of the polling, but I'm also not willing to go cold turkey. What indicators, polling or not, should I be watching?
Okay.
Katie R is actually me.
It's like they're all fake questions. Yeah. I would begin with just the simple premise that we are way far away from the 2026 elections. What the polls tell us right now says is not very connected to what will actually happen.
Over a year.
But as we get closer, I think there are 3 things to watch. One is the polling question called the generic ballot, where they just ask people are going to vote for a Democrat or Republican. Right now, even though it doesn't matter, Democrats have in the average about a 3-point lead in the generic ballot. When we had our huge victory in 2018, the last most credible polls from like the Wall Street Journal, ABC, had the Democratic advantage at 7 points. So most people estimate that given how narrow the House is, 3 would be theoretically enough to overcome Republican redistricting, but it would be quite close. But still too early to worry about that. The second thing to track is Trump's approval. Now, as Biden showed in 2022, the direct connection between a president's approval and midterm performance is not what it used to be because we're so polarized, there's so much negative partisanship. But Trump really, the only way Republicans can do very well in these midterms is if a bunch of the people who vote only in presidential elections who voted for Trump or first-time Trump voters turn out in the midterms. And I do think Trump's approval rating is somewhat connected to that measure.
Normally Trump will bring out huge numbers for presidential elections, which then impact like smaller races. But then otherwise, a lot of Trump voters don't vote for smaller elections, local elections.
And then the third thing is how people feel about the economy and inflation.
Yeah. So if Trump's approval is low, I don't know if it's low with the people who vote for him. Probably not. But that still doesn't mean they're coming out or not in 2026. So I think it's just a big question mark still.
So those are the sort of measures that I think will tell us the most as we get closer. But there's no need to panic about it yet or get too excited yet. We have a lot of time to go.
So we're not panicking about the Democratic Party's favorability being the worst it's been since at least 1990, according to Gallup.
Well, at this almost exact point in 2013, the Republican Party approval rating was worse than the Democrats right now.
Okay, I like that.
Then they won the Senate and picked up House seats in 2014.
Right. I haven't asked you this yet, but
let's do it right here live.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. How are you feeling about the reliability of polling right now? Do you feel the same as you did in 24? Do you feel different in any way?
I feel
they feel the polls I've seen, especially over the last couple of weeks, feel swingier to me, in that like the range of Trump approval has seemed quite large.
Yeah.
So I feel better about the midterm polls because the problem with polling has been getting less engaged people to participate. And so when you get to a likely voter filter for a midterm election, you're going to be more accurate if it is true that we continue to more accurately poll people with higher political engagement, which is why the polls were accurate in 2018 and pretty accurate in 2022. The big question will be what happens in 2028, because in 2024 the polls were right, but I mean, not to get super political nerdy here, but I know you appreciate this, but they were primarily right because pollsters used a statistical trick by waiting by the 2020 election results. That is probably less reliable, presuming Trump is not on the ballot in 2028. And then the question is, how do you get people? That would solve a lot of pollsters' problems if he ran again. So big win for G. Elliott Morris, I guess. I don't know, so it's hard to know. It may be really hard to get. We may have a 2016-like problem in the polling in 2028 unless we can figure out some other tactics to solve that problem.
Two very similar questions about the midterms that I'm combining. Tyler says, all of my hope for the future is riding on a Democrat midterm sweep. What are the chances that the midterms will actually happen? And if they do, can we trust them? And Evil Gamer asks, what reason does Trump or Republicans have to recognize the results in 26? Anyone like to field that?
So we've talked about this in the show. Like, there's no single moment where an election is recognized or not recognized by Trump or Republicans. We are in some way, to some extent, protected by the fact that elections are run in this incredibly disaggregated way. That will continue to be the case. That doesn't mean there won't be intimidation. That doesn't mean we won't be having to worry about everything from people claiming the votes are rigged, people trying to shut down counts, ICE agents outside of polling places. But Trump isn't responsible for deciding who
That is the ICE agents outside polling places. It would be just a type of intimidation, but also the redistricting in Texas as well as other red states. We have to worry about him trying to ban mail-in ballots, shut down polling places and stuff. Love to do that, to not let people vote because otherwise they'd lose.
Is or is not in Congress, and we shouldn't give him power that he hasn't tried to take. What does that look like? We don't know, but we're not in control of all those things. We should keep an eye on it. But our job is to put ourselves in a position to win, while worrying a lot about what it looks like to run an election, even just 16 months from now.
Did you know the Constitution gives full power on who the members of the House is to the House itself?
Oh, I mean,
yeah. The issue is that if they don't seat them,
so
Trump tells Speaker Johnson not to seat the Congress.
Here's how this would work. So the big question was, are Trump going to cancel the midterms? You're naive for thinking they're going to happen. Trump can't cancel the midterms. That's not a thing that can happen because elections are run by states. Where the choke points are where they could really play with the elections, other than all the things you mentioned that happened before the votes, is election certification, right? Where you have secretaries of state in Republican states who refuse to certify certain elections. Now, the good news there is that most states have pretty prescriptive recount laws. And so you would go, so if it's within this margin, you have to recount it. And if it stays within that margin, then we're going to do a hand recount, all that. When you get to the end of that, as we saw in 2020, the courts will almost certainly side that the election has to be certified because you followed all the procedures. The second point is the House seats the members who are elected. And in a case where the election is not certified, as happened with Al Franken in the Norm Coleman race in 2008, you can go a long time without anyone. You have to wait. They cannot be seated to election certified. But if election certified, the House could theoretically prevent seating someone if there was could come up with some sort of case that like this was fraud or it was stolen or all of that. Now that's hard if it's already been certified. Although the good news here is that the Supreme Court has actually weighed in on this because the Democrats refused to seat Adam Clayton Powell many decades ago because they believed that his election was corrupt. And the Senate and the Supreme Court ruled in that case that that the House's power in the Constitution was specifically around eligibility issues. So if you are 25 years old, citizen for 7 years, resident of the district or whatever that is, then you have to be seated. So the Supreme Court would have to undo, I think it's called Powell v. Morgan or something like that, to do that. So there are places they can do mischief, but there are guardrails around that. Now, guardrails have done us a lot of good recently, but so
I just think it requires it's not just Trump from on high.
Yes, that's right.
It requires a great deal of coordination and, by the way, unanimity among Republicans and their very narrow majority. You just you start to look at it, not saying it's not possible, but the election's not going to be canceled.
I sure see a path of Trump beating the drum that this was illegitimate and votes were stolen. And I don't want to be a doomer, but it's very plausible.
I think I think that you hit on the most important point, which is the more urgent dangers are the ones that happen before the votes are cast. It's suppression. I mean, Gavin Newsom brought this up when we interviewed him on Pod Save America about he thinks he's going to send ICE agents to stay outside of polling places.
Right. I would just say this, which is I worry about everything that we're talking about.
And literally everything.
Everything all the time. But I worry less only because say we knew that this is going to be the outcome, that Trump fucks with it, Republican, how's that going to change our behavior now and through the midterm? It's not. Like, I don't know what else we could do between now and the midterms to head off that possibility. So we might as well go forward and try to win the election first and then deal with the trouble when we get to
it's like too big to rig is the plan.
Right. Like that's all I mean. Like, I don't want to be Pollyannish and like we could look back on this and be like, yeah, they did the worst possible version. Absolutely. But we can't have people so cynical that they think the results aren't going to matter and that we can't overcome even if they put people outside of polling places.
Yeah, because that does have an effect.
Right.
You're like, well, they're not going to have the election anyway, so I might as well not get involved.
Self-suppress.
Right. Dan and I talked about this on Friday's pod, but
yeah, it will be harder for them to do intimidation tactics and stuff if there are a bunch of people at the polling places dislike Trump or dislike ICE or dislike law enforcement and the like. Would actually help defend others that are going there to vote.
Would love to hear what Tommy and Levitt think. Boop to you asks, should more Democrats take Newsom's lead and go on the meme offensive? Tommy?
Is that like giving a boop to a doggy, you think?
A boop to you? Oh, yeah.
Boop on the nose. I don't know. Whatever. I don't think every Democrat should do a Trump impression, which is what Gavin Newsom is doing. I think there's a more important thing that Gavin Newsom is doing that is less covered, which is a broader strategic focus on independent media and progressive media. And I think what Gavin is doing is he's doing tons of interviews with independent media. He's been on Pod Save America a bunch. He's talking to Brian Tyler Cohen. He's talking to a bunch of YouTubers and TikTokers. And that's what Trump did. That was really smart. He talked to the so-called Manosphere podcast. He talked to conservative podcasts. He talked to the comedy audiences all the time. And he built a relationship with those audiences. And he also helped those shows build their own presence and subscriber base. That is really smart. And so I think the Trump impression stuff is like getting him a lot of attention. Like, I don't know. What do you guys think? In 6 months, is Gavin Newsom doing a Trump impression? I'm a little bit skeptical. I think like its utility is getting attention. And when that utility goes away, you probably slow down or stop doing it. But
that'd be my guess.
The strategic focus of building up independent and progressive media is really smart and long-term and enduring, and something every single Democrat needs to do.
So there's a podcast called The Diary of a CEO. He does a lot of these really long-form interviews. It's incredibly popular on YouTube. And he did this interview with a pioneer in AI I was interested in. I clicked on it, and then I looked 2 months ago, Gavin Newsom sat down for a 2-hour interview with this guy. I didn't know that. It wasn't something that came across my feed, but that reached a huge audience of people that's apolitical. And like, whether the memes continue or not, like he's thinking about how to be the Democrats sucking up all the attention. Like that to me is the plan. It seems like it's working.
Yeah. Pod Save America is brought to you by Strawberry.me. The clock is ticking. The days are rolling by, turning into weeks, months, years. We spend nearly a third of our waking hours at work, but the unfortunate truth is that for many of us, that's time languishing away in a job we've outgrown or one we never wanted in the first place. But support the show. Texas Hold'em.
Their ads are pretty funny. They have a fun time with them, but yeah, we're skipping them.
Do any of you have a coherent theory of why J.D. Vance is so singularly annoying? The more I watch of him, the less I'm able to put my finger on it. Love this question.
I don't know if it's a coherent theory. I mean, I got a couple of reasons. Like one, he's got no sense of humor. Like
He has no personality. He's a smarmy little cocksucker who will do anything someone in power tells him to do, so long as he thinks it gets him closer to the power.
None. Literally
jokes
none.
are like Marco.
Well, remember in 2012 when like Mitt Romney was such a stiff that it was like a political problem for him, and his team tried to put out like all these background quotes like he's a prankster, he's a scamp, he's a scallywag. Remember that shit?
Yes.
And it was just like
scallywag Mitt.
It was such obviously bullshit because then Mitt Romney would do interviews and be like, "I love humor." It's like just no one talks like that. And the same is with JD Vance. Like JD Vance is a very angry, constantly aggrieved, whiny dude. Doesn't matter if it's like a podcast interview or a speech to all of Europe. He's just angry and aggrieved. And then second, like the guy is a shapeshifter politically. In terms of his own identity, he's had several different names. He's changed his religion recently. He has evolved his political worldview entirely. So, like, I don't know. I think that phoniness and authenticity is what reads.
Do you think he's legitimately aggrieved or performatively aggrieved?
I think he's legitimately an angry little prick.
I've come to believe that as well. I've thought about this a lot. Because this question, I wanted to pick it because I'm like, yes, I feel the same way. Like, I'm so enraged with him all the time, but I don't know why. Like, he has a rationale that everything they do is justified because the left hates America and is ungrateful to him and his ancestors who are the rightful heirs to this country. And he's fucking smug.
Who was he demanding offer gratitude yesterday? We were watching an interview.
Yeah, he was demanding. Well, he's done it to Mamdani. He's done it to obviously Zelensky.
Yeah.
There was someone else that
you and I were watching. We were all watching JD Vance in our office and getting mad about something. I think it was Mamdani.
But and the fucking smugness too. Like when because the fight that I got in with him over Kilmar Brego Garcia was he was like, I commented on the fact that like they made a mistake and whatever else, and he was like, obviously you haven't read the court document on this and blah blah blah. Like he's like a big, and then it's like when you read the court document, which his tweet complaining about it is now evidence in the case because the court document said the opposite of what. So he wasn't just wrong. He was like, "Oh, you obviously haven't read it yet." Blah blah blah. It's like, you didn't read it, you fucking moron. But
This
he's so
is-
confidently smug.
This is what a lot of right wingers do. They try and make it sound like you're stupid or crazy for having the worldview you do of, and then they're just lying.
It's real. And the
cheating.
difference with Trump is like Trump's tone is almost like, I know I'm full of shit, but at least I'm going to have some fun with it. And it's back to your original point. Like there is no humor. There's no having fun with anything. There's just dire smug grievance.
Yeah, there's something. I feel like I agree with that. Like I always see him, and I feel like there's two parts of it. One is he is a shapeshifter. He's been performing different people his whole life, and you just feel in everything he does the space between whatever he was, which is now nothing, and what he is now. You see that when he's in the donut shop. You see that like that. There's just quiet. Like when he's not putting on a show, it's so quiet and so stuck and awkward and strange. And like I think there's like rage in him about all of that. Like you can feel it from him. But the other part of it is like he made it. He made it. He made it out of Ohio. He made it to the heights of liberal elite culture. And then he switched sides and made it to the very top of right-wing culture. And he's still fucking furious. It's not working. Like he's not happy. He seems angry all the time. Like he's not getting the meaning from it he hoped. And like, who could be responsible for that? It's not him. It's not Trump. He's doing everything he's supposed to do. It's us. It's the liberals. It's the left.
Text from Michael O'Neill incoming. He made it out of Ohio.
Out of
and my wife.
Yeah. Well, he made it out of a tough part of Ohio. He had like a rough go of it. I mean, I didn't watch the movie, but the trailer with Glenn Close looked rough. She was in that moo. It seemed like it was tough. I don't know what actually happened in his childhood. I don't know.
I will. All this to say, though, I still think he is a very dangerous, not just dangerous for what he can do governing wise, but in 2028, I do not underestimate him as a very strong candidate, even though he does not have the charisma clearly that Donald Trump has.
I don't think anyone fucking likes him, not even on the right wing.
He is someone who's like very interesting to think of in
could be
comparison to
wrong.
Obama because on paper, like there's the similar background of like JD Vance is vice president of the United States now because of the way he told his own story, right? Similar to how Barack Obama did, right? Both in Dreams of My Father and the speech. And they both come from like what are really, really hard backgrounds, right? Obama, son of a single mother, father leaves on food stamps. Like JD Vance's story is told in a trailer. But the difference between the two of them is like what Barack Obama took from his experience was like, how do I help all the people who came up like I did? And JD Vance is how do I screw over all the people who came behind me? Like he just burns the bridge behind him. And it is like, it's very malicious. Like it's like shame of where he came from as opposed to understanding his true story and like how that should inform his values.
Ben Rhodes and I have been talking about this a lot because it does feel like when we were talking about that Claremont speech, and we talked about it offline too, that he is the almost mirror image of Obama with the story because they both have these stories, but they both went like very different.
It's like, and they don't worship an awesome God in the blue states.
That's right.
No, that's the problem.
Yeah, right. And fuck Little League. All right. This is from Over Under. Tommy, what do you think is the top foreign policy issue that we should be paying more attention to, talking more about?
I mean, I think it's an obvious one, but it's
climate change.
Climate change, sure. I think China. It's weird because Trump ran on being tough on China. It was like the centerpiece of his populist pitch, and now it's just absent from the conversation, and it's sort of weird to me. Like, and then I think as president, he's been soft on China. Like, they recently agreed to let NVIDIA sell these like pretty high-powered AI chips to the Chinese. Very weird. He's been soft on Taiwan. The tariffs have been all over the place. And then Trump made this announcement the other day where he's said we would allow 600,000 Chinese students into the United States to study. And it's actually inflamed the right wing. And it's just hard to understand. And so Rhodes and I are going to dig into this deeper on Pod Save the World next week. But I do think, like, given the stakes involved, it's odd that there's not more conversation about it.
Can I ask you, what's going on in Venezuela? Are we going to war with Venezuela?
Yeah.
What is happening?
Are we attacking them?
They're sending a bunch of naval ships and assets down to the region for like counter cartel something. It's
to interdict boats?
No.
Yeah. The Trump administration is trying to position to either attack cartels in Mexico or also attack Venezuela, maybe also Panama. It was brought up a couple times early on and kind of has been on the back burner, but allegedly we're also going to try and take the Panama Canal back. So who knows? But yeah, there's like battleships and stuff in the Gulf Coast, along the Gulf Coast.
There's been a steady kind of effort to name drug cartels and gangs as terrorist organizations and to officially designate them and to sort of like.
And once we have that on them on that official list, we can do whatever the hell we want to anyone we label as a drug dealer or terrorist, because they're terrorists now, and you can do anything to terrorists, including bomb in nations that will just ignore the sovereignty of and murder civilians who may be near them and do whatever we want.
socialize this idea of going to war with cartels, with or without the approval of the countries involved, where the cartels are actually working, like Mexico, for example. And now we're setting naval assets down to the region. Like that it feels like they are kind of trying to merge the war on drugs and the war on terror,
and like the
what could
immigration
go
stuff
wrong.
here.
Yeah.
Do you think they have read the book or
President of Peace, right? Gonna end all the wars so quickly.
seen the movie Clear and Present Danger?
Probably not.
Or the movie Sicario: Day of the Soldado, which this is the exact plot of?
I've not seen that.
Dan, I think about the movie Clear and Present Danger all the time. It's one of movies that are part of a canon of political thrillers where the end result is someone tells the truth publicly to solve the problem. And if you imagine now a deep stater going before Congress and saying, actually, President Trump did this in a corrupt way, the credits don't roll. The problem isn't solved.
It's so funny. We've 1,000 episodes. I feel like we've had this conversation.
We did,
before.
in fact, and I remember because the last time I said it's also the plot of Lioness Special Operations Lioness season 2, and you guys said, "What the hell is that?" So I left that out. It was actually the last time we did a mailbag, to be clear.
Oh my gosh!
Wow.
This is
I'm
long
sorry.
time, guys.
Hey, it's a good enough point to hear it again.
Who is the most controversial guest that you would low key have on the show?
You can't low-key have a guest. You can't ironically have a guest. But yeah, who would we want?
Yeah, no, I didn't.
I know. I'm
yeah.
just quoting. I know. I'm just thinking about it.
Isn't the question, doesn't it come down to, would you have Trump on the show?
Yeah, of course.
For sure, yeah.
Yeah.
JD Vance, sure.
Yeah. Joe Biden.
He won't come. Hunter. I think Tucker Carlson would be interesting.
Yeah.
I think this gets
Would
it.
you ask him about his new 9/11 truther documentary that he's
No, I'm unaware of that.
But you
I'll be
would
honest
ask
with
him
you.
if he was on.
Well, I'll be honest with the listeners. Like, I reached out to him when he was talking about his opposition to the U.S. bombing Iran and asked if he would come on. He declined, but he was polite about it. But I think he occupies an interesting space where he's clearly MAGA, has some very extreme views that I find abhorrent, but also doesn't always toe the party line in a way that is interesting and I think makes him powerful in that space.
Well, and then there's the creeping anti-Semitism that he's more and more flagrantly putting on display. That's part of it too.
Yeah, I don't know.
It gets at the bigger question, which we get a lot, depending on we have guests, is like, why are you platforming these people? And I think one of the points I think we've tried to make to people is, if someone already has a huge platform,
they are platforms.
They're already platforms.
Yeah.
Right. And so the goal here is to have a conversation where you can
Can't platform someone who's already like a household name or has like a larger platform than you have. If anything, you having them on is essentially platforming yourself using their platform.
hold them accountable for some stuff. You can ask hard questions. You can engage in a conversation on, like, at least you put Tucker Carlson like an area.
Yeah, my goal with Tucker would have been to talk about why going to war with Iran is a bad idea and why Republicans and Democrats both agree that Donald Trump shouldn't get sucked into this conflict.
Yeah, if someone is influential, you can't stop the influence. So just by not having them on different shows.
Yeah, we've tried that. We've tried that.
Remember Twitter?
Yeah,
Twitter and Trump.
And everyone got upset. Bernie Sanders talked to Joe Rogan, and then it's like, well, that didn't work, did it?
You guys have any controversial guests you'd have on? Mine would be Matt Iglesias. Kidding.
I just don't even think about it that way anymore. I just think that that's like not a way to think of, like, whoever would be interesting to talk to.
Biggest Dickus asks, didn't make that up. Serious question. I'd really like to hear the crooked people's opinion on. I'm a government-side civil defense attorney, and I'm being softly recruited to be a civil assistant U.S. attorney in a major metropolitan city. I'm here, so it's fair to say I don't share the politics of the administration, here being our Discord. This is a job I've really always wanted, but the realities of the moment make me want to run away. Is there any value or realistic need for people like me who care, are ethical, etc., in joining the federal government at this time? Presuming that eventually we're back in control, would I just be setting myself up to be purged and then hit the market with a scarlet letter on me? I think this is interesting.
Can I ask a question that someone else can answer the substance? Do you think you end up with the Discord name Biggest Dickus because you joined to like talk about Call of Duty when you're 13 and then your interests evolve over time?
Right,
Such a good question.
I hadn't even thought about why.
And all of a sudden, you just have the name Biggest Dickus and you don't even realize.
Do you remember messaging important communications advice to someone named Yum Peter
Yes,
Spoon?
that was Uncle Burton, yeah.
On AOL Messenger, the Discord of our time?
Yes, yes.
I thought about this one. Like, I think I would not have said go in to the administration in the first term. I think in this term, you do it. And I think you try to be a reasonable voice. You try to push things in the right direction. And failing that, at least be there to document what's going on and to hopefully tell people. Like, I kind of think that's the situation we're in right now.
Go in.
Yeah, any small acts of resistance, I think, by like government employees who don't agree with the administration are good. Make things take longer, lose documents that are important to them, leak things, do all that.
Copious notes.
Yeah,
Right.
I mean, I do. Like,
And that
like, bear
specific
witness,
role, like that specific role, right, would be you'd have a pretty there's a pretty big kind of like yes or no question around whether or not you should be there when you're sort of handed a case and you're like, oh, this is about trumped up charges against Kilmar Abrego Garcia, I'm out. But until then, being inside and being a good person inside, like, it's not about whether you take the job or not. Someone will be in the job. Should it be you or should it be somebody else?
Right. And by the way, the people who quit because they didn't want to bring the case against Abrego Garcia in Tennessee, that was a signal to everyone else and to future judges and future courtrooms that, like, this is a fucked up case.
Yeah, I guess I don't know how much discretion you have in these jobs, really. I defaulted to where you were. Like, I think take the job see if you can improve it from within. The person who's going to take it, if you don't, will probably be worse. But yeah, at some point you're going to get asked to prosecute the dude who threw a hoagie, and then it's nut cutting time. You walk out.
Yeah, I don't think you stay there forever, right? I mean, I'm thinking about all the CDC folks that just got pushed out, right? And they were like, look, didn't agree with them, wanted to try to make it work, tried my hardest to do the Maha agenda with as much integrity as we could have and to make it as best as possible, and it just didn't work.
Can I just read for everyone a quick Maha headline?
Yes, please.
Because I just want everyone to know how healthy we are making this nation. I'm vamping because this Twitter is slowly loading. New York Times headline: Pediatric Brain Cancer Group to lose federal funding. A network dedicated to early phase trials of treatments for children with brain cancer will be phased out. Thank you very much to RFK Jr., the HHS team, and everyone at the Maha world.
Insane how much like medical research and just scientific research in general we're killing with this administration. The U.S. is going to fall so far behind. I mean, already our education system making it so we were kind of screwed in the department, but this is just going to kill it even more.
Making us healthier by, throwing kids out of a trial for pediatric brain tumors.
I'll give you another Maha headline from today,
Yes,
also
please.
from the New York Times. The Dr. Oz run Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services today is launching a pilot program where they will now require prior authorization for medical procedures. And because normally in Medicare, you do not need that. They just grant it. And they've hired AI companies who are going to use AI to decide which are needed and which aren't.
AI death panels.
And the AI death panels, that's right.
Robot death panels. That's what we're
And
at.
the AI companies make money based on the savings they get Medicare, so they're financially incentivized to deny.
For those who may have been too young or don't remember, when Obamacare was trying to be passed in like the mid-aughts, whatever, or later aughts, the Republicans would constantly fearmonger that it's going to have death panels where the government will decide who lives and dies and who gets healthcare and all that. It was all a lie or whatever. Now they're fucking doing it with AI. We're going to have AI that decide whether you get the life-saving treatment you need or not. Terrible.
Care to seniors on Medicare.
Pilot program in 6 states.
Hope it's Palantir.
A couple of them are swing states. I noticed Arizona's on that on that list. So
How do we not make a thing out of AI death panels? I feel like
I know. It's
what are we doing, Democrats?
Yeah, death panels are distraction. From what?
From the pediatric counselors. From what? The Epstein files today. From what? The tariffs. All right.
None of it's a
Friendly cabbage
distraction. It's all just terrible shit.
What does Crooked see as the next steps for a strong progressive media ecosystem? A convention or policy event similar to what MAGA has? Media partnerships consolidation? ? Boy, do we have an event for you guys. It's called CrookedCon.
It's called CrookedCon.
I hope CrookedCon is much like TPUSA, where there's alleged fingering in the lobby. There's fist fights between MAGA influencers.
I'm sorry. I've just heard, this is the first time I'm hearing of supposed fingering.
Oh
my gosh.
Dude, you got to read about Will Summer. Oh, you might have been on vacation when this came out. Will
Yeah.
Summer at the Bulwark did a long report on a huge Twitter fight between some MAGA influencer types that revolved around an alleged
Allegations.
incident.
Alleged, that's right.
At a
Consensual
TPUSA.
fingering?
Oh, yes,
Yeah,
very much so.
yeah.
Yeah. Just in a public space.
Consensual, but people might have been married, and there's all these apparently a lot of shit goes down at TPUSA of a sexual nature.
Yeah, so
For
CrookedCon's
sure,
perfect
for
that.
sure.
CrookedCon.com.
saying.
Get your tickets.
Meet the love of your life.
See you in the lobby.
Meet the love of your life or meet the love of your weekend. Huh? CrookedCon.com.
Did you guys read that directly from the marketing team's pitch? Or not?
I think that works. I think that's pretty good.
Anyone else want to pitch CrookedCon? I mean, I think that was the best pitch for it, but
Oh, yeah.
we're going to have a good time.
Less pointing fingers among Democrats.
Finger pointing.
Less finger pointing, more.
The circular firing squad is something else entirely.
I'm triggered. What was that, Tommy? About? I'm sorry. Oh, sorry. Get back to your butter churn.
This is my bad.
I understand you have a new sourdough loaf you're starting. You have a new starter.
Oh, boy.
Well, I guess he technically did not use profanity there.
That's
so
right. That's true.
Yeah,
That's
that is
true.
true.
That's
That is true.
Clinical
We're excited about CrookedCon. It's filling up fast.
Yeah.
We're going to Pod Save America the night before. Still okay about it. We're going to Pod Save America the night before, November 6th. Live show. We haven't done a live show in a while. I'm
I
excited
know.
for that.
Great.
And then on Friday the 7th, we're just going to have all these panels. They're not robot death panels. We're going to have people, really smart, great people.
Some of the brightest minds in the party.
Some of the brightest
Full
minds in the
time
party.
Politicians.
Yeah. Some overlap in that Venn diagram.
Hopefully more as
Yes.
we go along. We're going to have some good conversations. And, we hope to see you all there. CrookedCon.com.
Pod Save America is brought to you by Hims. Hims can't solve snoring or blanket stealing, but when it comes to performance, Tommy, they've got you covered.
Rock solid.
Take control of ED with personalized treatments made with proven ingredients prescribed by licensed providers 100% online. Through Hims, you can access personalized prescription treatment options for ED like hard mints and SexRS Plus, Climax Control. If prescribed, Hims offers access to ED treatment options ranging from hard mints to trusted generics that cost 95% less than brand names. do.com/PSA.
Do any of you guys play fantasy football? Are you excited for football in general this year? Are the Pats back?
You want to start with the Pats, Tommy?
I don't know if we're back, but we're better. I mean, Drake May look good. Mike Vrabel's good. Josh McDaniels is back. Picking up Stephon Diggs.
Trevion Henderson.
Yeah, we get some good players.
So I play fantasy football.
Mm-hmm.
I play a lot of fantasy football. It's really a
So you're in multiple leagues?
I'm in multiple leagues.
Wow,
that's
how many?
Track of, Dan.
I'm in 2 main leagues. I have a dynasty league on top of that.
Okay.
And I now play best ball fantasy football.
What's
which
that?
is you draft your team at the beginning of the year. You play in like large field tournaments. And then you don't have to do anything. It just takes the best scores. You have to manage it.
That is so much to keep track
Yes.
of.
Well, the best ball thing, once you do it, it's done.
I was in 2 leagues one year and I was like, I could barely fucking pay attention.
I think more people in politics should do fantasy football, or I'm not going to urge people to do gambling, but I do think there is like a real lesson in understanding that's like applicable to political strategy. There's like understanding value and understanding ceiling versus floor outcomes, because like that's what you're always trying to pick. You're trying to find someone who has the best possible outcome, and you're willing to take on additional risk to do that. And the Democratic Party lives in a world of high floor, low ceiling in all of our decision making. And so, but yeah, I'm a fantasy football lunatic. I really picked it up during the pandemic and haven't let it go.
You know, I moved out here in 2014, and that was like the last year I paid attention to sports anyway, because my head started getting like so into politics. And every year I'm always like, I think I want to get like, it's because baseball's really, there's just like so many fucking baseball games. But football's like really fun every Sunday to watch football. And every year I'm like, I'll either do fantasy football or something that like makes me pay attention to football. Now that I have fucking 2 kids, it's like, I don't know how.
So I was a Washington Commanders fan, so which you couldn't even use the name of my team for like a decade in public discourse. So it's like very hard to follow them.
We're
so
gonna be heading back to it though.
That's right, according to Trump.
Yeah, good point.
But so fantasy was like the way in which I stayed very involved in football. And I also living on the West Coast, football is great because it's over at 8:30. Yeah, starts at 10 a.m., which is awesome. And then if you have small children, on the London game, when it starts at 6 a.m. is like a real gift.
Bet the Lunder. You know, this conversation made me think of something that pissed me off about JD Vance. I remember what it was. So JD Vance did an interview yesterday with this guy on Fox named Will Kane, who's basically like a set of veneers who was given a show. And they were talking about Ohio State versus Texas, I think. And clearly he'd been prepped that this was going to come, right? Because like Will Kane's like, I got my orange tie, and you're a Buckeyes guy, JD. And JD's like, I'm told that the Buckeyes are an 11-point dog. And Will Kane, who came from sports media, was like, no, it's like not even close to the line.
He couldn't even pretend to be nice to him about it. Like, it was funny because it was a rare moment where Will Kane was like, what are you talking about?
If you understand anything about gambling lines or football, it would be fucking absurd for the defending national
11
champion
points.
dog at home. Like, it's impossible.
It's crazy.
Yes.
It's crazy. So like, again, total phony. Was beclowned on Fox News
By a clown, literally. It was the first beclowning ever done by a often beclowned person, Will Kane.
Yes.
To our earlier conversation, immediately blamed someone, nameless.
Staff,
blamed his staff. He was like, someone, I don't know, someone sent me a link with the line. Someone sent me that line.
Did they? I think you got a prep document.
Glad that you're getting good information all the time.
Yeah.
You want to talk about the Pats at all? Did we talk about the
He
Pats?
did.
Oh, at the beginning. Right. Sorry, I missed that.
I think it's done.
Which part?
This part of the show.
It's the longest you've ever been silent on podcasts.
Monica Not Monica asks, Labor Day special, since it's Labor Day. You are attending a holiday cookout and must choose between a paper plate with 2 hot dogs, a scoop of potato salad, and a wedge of watermelon, or a paper plate with a cheeseburger, bean salad, and 2 chocolate chip cookies. There is a condiment table with standard toppings, but between you and it is someone who wants to critique your recent Twitter posts, so you may have to do without. You have arrived late, and the only remaining beverage to pair with your food is LaCroix Limoncello. Which plate are you taking?
Why is
this question hurt my head?
Why is the paper versus normal plate? Why is that so highlighted?
Because I'm sure this person thinks you don't need a straw with your coffee. So I think it's for me.
I missed the paper plate part.
Here's what I do. I take the cheeseburger in one hand. I take the 2 cookies. I just throw the bean salad out.
100%.
Now I'm mobile.
And the
Now I'm
limoncello.
mobile. Yeah, I don't want the limoncello.
This is the whole thrust of the question. They're trying to figure out whether you want a hot dog, hamburger, bean salad, whatever, and whether you're willing to whether you love condiments so much that you engage in an awkward conversation about your Twitter feed to get them.
Yeah, I just took it as like, which plate you can't have any condiments. Which plate do you pick?
Oh,
to me, it's easy. I just pick the hot dogs.
Yeah, I would pick hot dogs.
Bean salad is not that, and I like watermelon. And bean salad is not that great.
What is
for
that
at least
bean
I don't think so.
salad? I don't know.
It's like there's some mayonnaise and beans. Let me tell you, that's
Based one.
And I like potato salad, and I like hot dogs.
Yeah, that's great.
That's me. I don't know. Anyone else?
And I think if somebody criticizes, I think the best thing to do if somebody talks to you about something you don't feel like talking to, but probably just agree with them more than they ever expected. It was a stupid post. Right here, I'm out. You're right. You got my number.
I totally hear you.
It was stupider than even you're saying.
Man, do I regret that. Moving on.
Have never gotten in a fight with someone in person over my tweets.
Yes.
Yeah.
Not likely to happen.
Yeah.
That'd be a new low.
I know that's
I don't tweet.
Handy Pants. You guys have been doing the podcast.
Handy Pants sent this in directly from TP USA conference.
Confirmed that Cricket Con. Handy Pants.
You guys have been doing the podcast for a good while now, 1,000 episodes. Looking back at those first few years, how have each of you changed as podcast hosts? Who would like to begin? See, there's a lot of growth.
Yeah, I changed this show. That's what happened here.
I don't know. Like, it's like, I think like we over the years. I mean, part of it is like, did we change? Did the environment change? But like, I do think one thing, like, it got worse. I think during the pandemic, like we said from the beginning, you know, we had like a slogan, right? We want to entertain, inform, we want to inspire action, and like informing people and talking about what people do to get involved, like that's a little bit more objective than what's subjective, which is just being entertaining. And I think there were times where we got so concerned about the mission that we didn't focus enough on like what we were really in, which is this crazy attention war. And I think sometimes we felt like, oh, people would message us like, you guys got to talk about climate change. It's so important. And so then we would try to force it in or try to prove we were doing what we were meant to do as like good members of the resistance, which led to, I think, a worse product. And I think we've gotten more comfortable just feeling like it's very important that people come back because it's like a fun conversation. And that's not like a nice thing. It's like a necessary thing. I think that's one thing we've done differently over the years.
It's taken me a while and I've not gotten there yet, but I think more about what do I want to say about this and less about how it's going to land necessarily, because I think if you're constantly like, oh, this take will get me in trouble or someone's going to be mad about this and whatever else, then it just makes the conversation tighter and also just harder to have, and you just start feeling like
feels less
I have a
authentic.
platform to say this stuff, I might as well say, but it's not to not be thoughtful about what you believe, but like I just try to say what I believe, you know.
Like, I love doing this podcast. I'm very grateful you guys for starting this company so I can do this podcast. Like, I love talking about politics. I love talking about smart, entertaining people who are my friends. I would say that for a very long time, I like had a real identity crisis about being a podcaster. It's like in my life, like I always was like a political operative. Like that's what I was from the second I left college, and it's what I always was. And then all of a sudden I was a podcaster. And I will say that when I left the White House, Barack Obama, as he would do, had some life advice for me. And I told him that I was like negotiating with CNN about doing like a cable deal. And it's like Axe was doing that. Jay Kearney had just finished one. Like a bunch of his people were doing it. He's like, that's a good thing to do right away. Like keep your profile. It's like, but I just don't want to look up in 10 years and still see you on cable TV all the time. Like that's not what you want. And so like that haunts
I was like,
me.
wait, don't worry about that. That whole economy is going to fall apart.
That's right. And so that like has always haunted me about like we're media people, and it's this conflict between.
And then he went and
Yeah.
started
No. I think
including a podcast.
Yeah, he was a podcast.
Anyway, check him out with Bruce Springsteen and
Right,
Netflix.
yeah. Well, I can't turn on Netflix without hearing his voice talking about some migrating manatees.
Yeah.
But I think
these manatees make the cars right here in America.
But like there was this moment, like it took a while. It really has been probably since the last couple of years, but just like this is politics now. Right?
Yeah.
Politics and media are the same, and it's information warfare. And even though I would like say those things and write those things, like it took a while to like adjust in my head that like the way I will contribute to politics going forward is not like being on conference calls, like going through polling data for candidates like you used to do, or like working on messaging or pitching reports or other thing. It's like having a platform and using it and thinking about ways in which you can grow the platform and other people can grow the platform and stuff like that. It's understanding that media is politics now.
Yeah. You want to clear a room? Tell people you're in podcasting. You know what I mean?
Can I tell you the hardest thing about just like going about life is when you're like at the playground with your kids or you're at a birthday party with your kids and like, so what do you do?
Yeah, no, it's hard. I never engage on that.
Well, in an Uber on the way home from a trip recently, I told the guy I was a consultant, and usually that just like ends the whole thing. And he's like, "What are you consultant in?" And I was like, "PR." He's like, "You mean like marketing?" And then I then had an hour conversation where I just had to pretend I was in marketing because his wife was in marketing.
Do you know how many Uber drivers I've just said podcasting, and then by the end of the Uber, they're like, "Oh, Pod Save America," and then they subscribe.
I can't do that. I would not be in sales.
The reaction to this had changed a lot over time. Like 2017, when I was like, "Hannah, can we please move from San Francisco to Los Angeles so that I can do a podcasting company with my friends?" It was like that was a challenging conversation. You know, the people in my life were like, "You have a plan B, right?" There's a lot of that. And
She's
now
pretty happy now, isn't
now
she?
it's far more mainstream. Jeez, dirty, hairy threat of my wife. Pretty happy now. But no, now it's like a very different thing. It's like it was a much more niche thing. I think it's more widespread. I think you're right, Dan, though. Like the kind of media piece of politics is so much more important now. It's much more central. It's like I think the way I would think about it is like we all spent so much time shaping the words, and now the clear challenge is getting the words to the people and like being a part of the last mile is like interesting and fun.
Yeah. Schumer fan 69.
Ay.
If in the near future someone can go to ChatGPT and ask it for a political podcast to catch up on the day's news, are you worried you will be replaced?
Kinda. I mean, there'll probably be an older, like some generation that wants real people to do their news, but then there's going to be folks who just could care less. Is what I think.
I've been working on the side an AI podcasting company.
Oh,
to get ahead of this, yeah.
Are they gonna let you be part of it?
Dan.
Well, I'm starting out in charge. How that ends, I don't know. But
yeah, it's called Great Point, Dan. I'm like, I go back and forth about. I feel like AI. We get bogged down because it's like an abstraction, right? Like it's a tool that can do a lot of different things. And so like, was the hammer good for? Like it's a very broad question. And I feel like sometimes it's like, do I think like technology that can imitate real people to confuse people into thinking they're real is good? I don't. Am I as worried about that as I am all these other implications? No, because on some level, like it would just be doing an impression of the things that already existed, right? And people ultimately are seeking something out that feels new. So it's like, am I worried about something that's kind of a mirror of what people have already done? Not as much, maybe not as much as I should be. I don't know.
I'm worried about AI a lot, as anyone can listen to offline knows. But on this point, AI is limited by its inability to be creative. For now, but like, if AI is always going to be,
these people don't understand it, but we are so far from actually intelligent AI, let alone the power it would need to work, that none of the like actual like freeform thought or anything is anywhere in the near future.
scraping the internet or the entire world for information, and that's what's like there's just something, and I notice it when you just to try it out, like when you ask it to write or you ask it to do stuff like that, it's just not. I know it's going to get a lot better. I can imagine it being extremely proficient and accurate and all these kind of things, but there's just an added, like the humor, I think, is not as good as it could, as sharp as it could be. It's I don't know if it'll ever completely replace human creativity in terms of just like being a newsreader. Yeah, no, I think that's
it's hard.
Can only draw from things that already exist.
Technology is improving, and it's like, okay, what can it improve? Like, what does it look like when it's maximally
right.
improved?
That's what.
And what are the limits that are like endemic to the technology?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the like limits of it is like it is of the past. It has to be of the past, and we're not. We're making new things.
Totally.
That's and like that is a protection. Like that is something that like I think like it traps you in the moment. Like did it scraping.
And that can never change,
right?
No matter how good it gets,
right?
It can change. I mean, we're all trapped in the past, and we have the capacity to take what's in the past and use it to project new things forward.
That's sort of what I am too. It's like I think that's what creativity is. It's like kind of taking information that already exists in your brain and like connecting different strands that people might not think of otherwise.
Yeah,
I think what it's missing though is individual human experience, right? Like it can't ever. That's the thing.
Potentially, unless Till reads all the memoirs in the world.
But then like okay, when like someone makes a video or a fake photo, wow, that looks really real. It only has a function in a world where people expect most things to be real, right? What is it doing an impression of real things, right? And in a world where there are fewer of those real things, it starts to have less meaning and have less utility because it has to do the trick.
Yeah.
Like it has to do the function of replacing someone. Those people need to exist to be replaced.
Right. Well, we'll see. Christy Gnome's Injector asks, that's great. Due to a series of shocking coincidences and mishaps, you find yourself trapped in an undersea habitat, stocked with food and water and little else. The seas are rough, and it will be between 2 and 3 weeks until you are rescued. Oh, so 2 and 3 weeks. Okay. You are down there with one other person. It's either Stephen Miller, Don Jr., or Marjorie Taylor Greene. Of the three, who do you hope it is?
It's
not drugs.
It's not Stephen Miller.
Yeah, that's.
Yeah. Who would say someone for you? Marjorie Taylor Greene?
Yeah,
me too.
Marge.
Wow.
What a great way to meet your crush.
Yeah, you're doing workouts.
You were gonna go Don Jr.
Well, I just want to make a joke about him having a bag, but I think Marjorie Taylor Greene is the more fully formed person, surprisingly.
What's interesting is when I made up
these
these questions,
those two were tied for me.
Stephen Miller's like you push him out of the habitat.
Yeah. Well, I thought it was more evenly.
Like, yeah, if I could murder while we're there, then I'd pick Miller.
I pushed myself out of the habitat.
Right, you did.
Exactly.
Christy Gnome's Injector.
Yeah, I'm Christy Gnome's Injector.
Yeah, Lovett did this question.
And I thought it'd be more balanced in part because but as I say it, no, I think we all like you. I would rather spend the time with Marjorie Taylor Greene because I do think she has a genuine ideology, but so does Stephen Miller, but he's so heinous. But when you maybe like learn something, trying to kind of understand him, like after the time,
keep in mind on Katie Miller's podcast, JD Vance did say if he could pick one cabinet member to fly transatlantic with next to on a plane, he would pick Stephen Miller, even though Stephen Miller's not in a cabinet. That's how much he likes Stephen Miller.
He said that to Stephen Miller's wife.
Yeah, but she gave him an out with the cabinet.
Just a perfect example of why he's the phoniest loser. That is such a lame answer. It's not what the question asked. You're kissing the ass of the person you're naming. It's like, you suck.
In fairness, probably more powerful than most of the cabinet. That's true.
Yeah, that's right. I think the answer has to be Marjorie Taylor Greene. I mean, just imagine you could egg her on for conspiracy theories. So Marjorie, it's day 7 here. We're still waiting for the rescue boat. Tell me about the Jewish space laser again.
Right. Yeah. Or the CrossFit classes for free.
Yeah.
You think you could get good info out of Don Jr. that could be useful
about
somehow?
His dad.
Yeah, that's the only thing that just popped
interesting.
in my head.
That's interesting.
He probably has good stories.
Well, I think as many intelligence agents have figured out over the years, a little bit of flattery, a couple drinks, he eventually softens.
That's true. Okay. This is Lovett's second question. I'm with that little girl is me.
Solid combo.
You can open a portal right now. You will either see yourself 20 years ago or 20 years from now. Would you rather tell your past self about the future to change our present, or learn about the future so that you can shape it from this point forward? That's a really good one.
I'm definitely going to the future. I feel pretty good about where my life is now.
Wait.
Right, you can either go to the past and
Right.
make your present better, or you can go to the future and have knowledge, bring knowledge back to the present.
And you'll go to the future.
I'll go to the future, both because I think you can maybe help change the world, but also, just like in Back to the Future 2, I would get the lottery numbers and the Super Bowl winners.
Austin has a thumbs up to that.
Yeah, you fly back and go back in time. You either say buy Bitcoin, or you go in the future.
That's a
and
good
you tell
point.
yourself,
I did not think about that.
Run from the machines.
Yeah, tell the machines you really like them starting in 2022.
What if you go to the future though, and it's just like an apocalyptic wasteland?
That'd be bad.
And you don't know how or why.
You know what?
Well, we know why.
But what's interesting about this, what I like about this is going in the direction I thought, because I did think everyone's initial response would be, well, I love my life. Yes, Trump is bad and things are bad, but this is the life that I have and where I led. I'd love to change my future.
My initial response was go to the past.
But the thing is, if you
what
do
are you
go to the
dissatisfied
past,
about your present?
No. Oh, I think, it's funny because this is how broken my brain is. I didn't even think about my personal life. I just thought about the politics in the world, and I was like, we go back and we
don't write that joke.
Don't give those jokes.
Yeah. Good to see you, Mr. Trump. You're gonna have a proud future in politics.
And tonight I'm naming Donald Trump to my cabinet.
Hey, you know what you need to do? Run the Kennedy Center starting today.
Oh, that would have been so good.
Yeah. Hey, but it's interesting, right? Because then you're saying, okay, I would like to have information about the future to change it. But you didn't have that about a present you currently have that you wouldn't change. And if you went back and gave yourself in the past information, it would not only give you power now, it would give you power 20 years from now. So that to me is what's interesting about it.
It's interesting.
Cool.
Yeah, buy Bitcoin. Smart.
You going past future?
No, I'm a real butterfly effect person, and I feel like anything I changed in the past might impact today. And then like, what if my kids?
You
are
already
here
gonna make
also
out with your
think-
mom?
What?
Like Marty
No.
McFly.
What
I knew exactly
the
what
fuck
I
are you
knew exactly what he meant. We knew what he meant.
Oh, got it. Like Dan's Dan's porno
flipped
too.
out. He's like,
I was just saying by the way that Hannah enjoys the lifestyle now because you're a very successful media company. That's literally all I was saying. Oh boy. Anyway, all right. Last thing before we go, you're about to hear a special preview of our subscription show, Inside 2025. If you're not already a member, we really hope you'll consider signing up. Dan, Elijah only wants you to do these pitches, which I know is a signal to the three of us that we don't do them as well, and he's right. And you do them better.
It's important that I
but it makes me want to try harder. But for
especially now
you do
that we're literally Substack competitors, I think it's good for me to do this.
Yeah.
It's a good example why Democrats fail, right? Because it's not because of the words he's going to use. He's a trusted messenger. We haven't built enough credibility. So it's not like we have the magic. We said what Dan said. It wouldn't work.
So the usual pitch is you would get ad-free episodes and you can hang on the Discord, which are all great things. People like that. But I think the reason to be a subscriber is the mission of this company, the company you guys started 1,000 episodes ago, was to build
Give or take a few.
Just go with the bit. The company you guys built 1,000 episodes ago, give or take a few, was to build a counterweight to the right-wing media ecosystem. And when that started, the idea was Fox News. And now it is much bigger and more dangerous than Fox News. And the need for a counterweight is even greater than ever was before. You can argue that we almost lost the 2020 election, we lost the 2024 election because Democrats lost the ability to communicate with large swaths of the American people. The way to fix that is not to double down on the old broken media system. It is to build an alternative, independent media ecosystem. So your $10 a month, I think it is, it goes to help do that. It helps the company develop new initiatives, develop new shows, get bigger, reach new audiences, find more talent. And so it is an investment, just like your contribution to a political campaign or a PAC. This is an investment in a better, more progressive, democratic future.
Can we put some fucking
Well said,
patriotic
Dan.
music
That's
on
why,
it?
that's how we do that. That's why
how
Dan
you
does the
pitch.
pitches, guys.
That's beautiful.
And
see, Dan.
we're now on Substack alongside YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Supercast, and all the info you need to be part of all this is at crooked.com/friends. Here's Inside 2025.
I'm revealing myself as a Bill Simmons listener.
I mean, Bill Simmons, obviously legendary podcaster, and in many ways responsible for the creation of this podcast, but I don't think he invented the word gimmick.
I don't know, man. I was just like, what do I call this? Well, Simmons calls it a gimmick, so I'm just going to call it that. Okay.
Yeah.
Before this recording, I gave you guys a prompt. Here's the prompt. You're a political consultant, and you can magically make the campaign that you're working on have a robust presence in any of the platforms listed here: TikTok, Facebook/Meta/Twitter/Substack, TV news, podcast/YouTube, and then digital and linear paid advertising. Rank those in the order you prefer your campaign to have a robust presence on, and then let's see how much you guys align. Dan, what's most important for you?
Before Dan goes, can I just ask why you grouped, I know Facebook and Meta obviously, but why you grouped Facebook, Meta, Twitter, and Substack all together?
I don't know, man. I was looking back on this and I was like, why did I do that?
Okay, I know.
I'm actually probably not interested in whatever the hell this is. But so that will be the end of my stream for the day. Gonna call it a little early. Down probably. Thank you all for watching. Peace.